One of those relatives was my older cousin Alan. He came by mostly on the weekends. Alan was a druggie and a drunk, but I treated him with the same respect and trust as I would anyone else in my family. Until one day, he came over to visit my mom and get some food. I'm sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. He walks over to talk to me and my kitten Luna flips. This is a 2-month-old little black cat, sweetest thing ever. She doesn't scratch or bite. She's perfect. But when Alan approaches, she lets out this unholy growl. The only thing I can compare it to is a dying, cornered animal. It scared me shitless. Alan keeps approaching. Luna, sitting by my feet, suddenly jumps onto the table where she knows she isn't allowed and arches her back. She puffs out her fur and snarls and shrieks at him. Alan backs off and leaves without getting his food. 2 minutes after he's gone, she's back to being my little angel. The same thing happened that next week, except this time I'm watching TV on the couch and Luna is in my lap. My other cat, Coco, is on the armrest. Alan shows up and tries to get near me. This time, both cats give an exorcist impression. I was horrified enough myself that I didn't dare move. Once again, Alan leaves immediately. Flash forward a month. I'm home alone. Alan knocks on our door and, being cautious, I answer with the chain on. He's asking for food and a shower. I tell him to come back when my mother is home. He doesn't even get a chance to respond. Luna wiggles out and begins to circle him, growling. He reaches down to grab her and she immediately goes for his hands. He has her for all of 2 seconds before she lets go and runs back inside. I slam the door and call my mom. She tells me to lock all the windows and if he knocks again, to call the police. I check outside. Alan is gone. I remain on alert until my mother gets home. He still isn't back. We go to sleep thinking all is fine. That night, my mother gets a call from her sister. Alan tried to kidnap my other cousin, Kelly. Not only that, the police went to his apartment after the attempt and found somebody in his tub, dead. Things come to light after this. My cousin, who ran before being caught, wasn't just a druggie and drunk. He was a murderer and sex trafficker, and my cats knew. Not the facts, but they sensed what he was and protected me. I'd be dead if not for them, or worse. I don't know where Alan is now. My whole family is on the lookout for him, and not to take him to court. My mom was in her early 20s, so this would have taken place in the late 70s. She lived alone in a rather crappy apartment not too far from Atlanta, and was more or less a party girl who dated a lot of guys she met at clubs. She met a guy when she was out partying at a bar. She thinks it was called Penrod's. But one night, I guess they hit it off, because they exchanged numbers and decided to go out together again sometime. This is how she described it. I had seen him around the bars quite a bit, and was smitten because he was movie star good looking. Tall, dark hair, fit, nice skin as I recall. He asked me out for that Friday and got my contact info, but I don't think we really talked much that night. At this point I should mention her cat, Tommy. He was a slim, solid black stray she had taken in, and apparently he was the best cat ever because he loved my mom tremendously. He'd wrap himself around her shoulders and go with her on car rides, hang out with her all the time, basically do a lot of really cool cat shit like that. He was also very jealous and protective of my mother, so whenever the phone rang, he'd throw himself on top of it so she couldn't take her attention away from him. He'd jump on top of her newspaper when she was reading it because it, too, distracted my mom from paying attention to him. Anyway, date night rolls around. My mom is really excited for her guy to show up because he was allegedly really hot. However, when he got there, Tommy went nuts. This cat was usually really friendly and affectionate, but he lost his shit when this guy came inside. For the short while that the guy was at my mom's apartment, Tommy glared at him, growling menacingly with huge dilated pupils and his hair standing on end. Of course, my mom was humiliated because Tommy was making her date nervous and more or less cock-blocking the shit out of them. She sat there petting Tommy, hoping he'd calm down. The date night conversation was going nowhere, and the guy started to act more and more tense and uncomfortable. My mother wasn't sure if he was weirded out by the cat or if the two of them were just not making a great connection. Either way, her date was being very quiet and awkward, but he didn't seem to want to leave either. It is also important for me to mention that my mother's date neatly dodged any questions about where the two of them would be going that night. In her words, he was non-conversational and appeared almost annoyed by me, like he didn't want to be there. I remember feeling very self-conscious and awkward, like maybe he had decided in the better lighting that I didn't look so good. It got awkward just sitting there, waiting for him to tell me what he had planned for our date, and not even talking. Then, out of nowhere, Tommy launched himself at the guy's face and just started going to town on him, screaming and tearing at his flesh like he was out for blood. My mother quickly ripped Tommy off of this guy and scolded him, apologizing profusely. All of a sudden, the guy made up some painfully obvious lie about how he suddenly needed to leave and seemed inappropriately angry at my mom. They never ended up going out or even talking again. A few days later at work, my mother was telling a coworker about her date, leaving out the part where Tommy mauled the guy's face. She more or less wanted to brag about how hot the guy was and happened to mention his name. The coworker went absolutely chalk white and explained to my mother that 2 or 3 women had recently come forth and pressed charges against that same guy for date raping them. Apparently he had met them at some local clubs and committed the acts when he took them out on individual dates. I guess he left my mom alone because Tommy had made such a huge scene. And I guess Tommy had sensed the guy's intentions and wanted to protect my mother at all costs. Either way, he sounds like an amazing cat and could have saved my mom's life. I had been arguing with my parents about something, probably school. I don't remember about what, and really, does any 16-year-old need a reason to argue with their parents? The fight went on, and I finally just stormed out of the house because I just wanted to get away from them for a bit and jumped in my car. But for some reason, I took my dog. I had my dog, Brutus, since I was 12, just a brown and black mutt of who knows what parentage, but he was a great dog. One of his best tricks I got him to do was snarl on command. He would snarl and bark when someone knocked on the door, but I got him to the point where I could just say to him, "Who's there?" and he would instantly snarl, fangs bared, and growl a deep, rumbly growl. I loved doing it to friends when they would come over, just to freak them out. That night I took Brutus with me. I didn't want to be alone, really, just away from my parents, so I decided to go to a local park in the neighborhood and just sit quietly for a while and calm down, maybe walk the dog around. Keep in mind, this is suburbia land, mid-1980s, very Brady Bunch. Nothing bad happened in my neighborhood. So I'm at the park, which is sort of triangular shaped and slopes upwards slightly to one point. The night is creeping in, but it's dusk and still semi-light out, and the park is deserted except for me and my dog, sitting in the grass, just enjoying the night. Deserted. Until I notice a man walking on the other side of the park. I noticed him because he was walking straight towards me. He's not with anyone. I didn't see him pull up in a car, and he's still about a football field away from me, but he's walking straight at me. I'm thinking maybe he'll call out to me, or wave his hand at some point. Maybe he's lost or something, needs directions. I don't know. But he doesn't. Slowly, steadily, he just keeps walking towards me. At some point, it creeps into the back of my mind that this is, well, not right. There's only the two of us in the park at night, and I don't know him. He shouldn't be coming over here. But I also worried that if I got up and started running, that he would start running at me. An odd sensation to have, so I sat there, just hoping that he would peel away at the last moment, change directions, Maybe he didn't see me there. Maybe he would go somewhere else. But he didn't. He kept right at me. And he's so close now I could see his clothes, which looked odd, and he wore boots of some kind, and he's big, bigger than me. But that's all I really remember. And he finally gets about 5 feet away from me, and he's not stopping. He's coming right at me, and he's still not stopping. And I lean over to Brutus and say, "Who's there?" And he snarls his most ferocious snarl and growls that growl from deep in his chest, and the man stops dead in his tracks. He pauses and looks at me, and I look at him, and Brutus is next to me snarling and growling at him. The man puts his arms up like he's surrendering. "Okay," he says. "Okay." He turns 180 degrees and starts walking that same slow, steady walk back from wherever he came from. When he gets to be what I judge a safe distance away, I get up from the grass and quick step it back to my car with Brutus, never taking my eyes off that man, jump into my car, and peel out of there as fast as I can. To this day, I have no idea who that person was, or what he wanted, but I knew, just knew and still know, that I had dodged something horrible, something terrible that night, and it was because my dog saved me. This happened 10 years ago when I was about 6. I'm 16 now, female. My mother was out shopping with me. She had to get something really quick, and it was a little warm, so she locked the car, cracked the windows, and left me with our German Shepherd / Australian cattle dog mix, Bear. Bear was the sweetest dog ever. My ride until I was 2, and my protective cuddly pillow until I was 12. She was asleep in my lap when she suddenly sat straight up. That's when I realized that a man was near the car. The window was cracked enough that he could reach in. He put his hand in, trying to grab the lock and unlock my door. I guess I was at an angle where he could see me. Our windows were tinted, but the front windows you could see out of. He probably didn't see Bear until it was too late. He put his hand in, and Bear, our sweet, loving dog, bit him directly on the hand hard enough I think she broke a few fingers. He took his hand out, screamed in pain, and ran off. Bear then sat on me protectively and refused to budge until my mom got back. My mother flipped when I told her, hugged, kissed me, and hurried back home, stopping by Jack in the Box to get Bear some well-deserved hamburger patties. I have no idea what that man's intentions were, and thank God for Bear. Unfortunately, Bear passed away on Christmas Day 2012. She was the greatest dog ever and saved my life. Six months ago, I had gotten my first apartment. My mother and sister helped me move, and the first week by myself was great. I was enjoying my freedom and independence and becoming a real adult that can support herself. After I had gotten used to the place, I was starting to feel a bit lonely. Coming home after school and work every night to an empty and quiet home was something I was not quite used to. Luckily for me, my neighbor had a cat. He was, and still is, a sweet and loving tabby cat that loved attention. The neighbors weren't very good pet owners, though. They neglected the poor thing and hardly fed him, and he was literally skin and bones. So whenever the cat would come over to my place, I would feed him whatever I had in the fridge. A few weeks passed since I moved, and the neighbors decided to move. It took 3 days in total for them to pack up their stuff and leave. I noticed a couple days after they left, their cat was still wandering around outside in the rain, looking pathetic. I kept him with me for a couple of days, hoping they would come back for him. They didn't. Once I knew for sure that they wouldn't come back, I checked with my landlord to see if I could keep him. After signing some papers and paying a pet deposit, the cat was mine. I decided to name him Crybaby because he was very vocal about everything, especially for food. Crybaby had adjusted really well with his new life. He was gaining weight fast and was even more affectionate with me. With him around, I didn't feel lonely in my home anymore. Skip forward to 2 months. I was in my room sleeping. Crybaby woke me up meowing loudly in the living room. Still half asleep, I looked over to my alarm clock to see it was 4 a.m. What the fuck? He never did this before, at least not this early in the morning. Was he hungry? I got out of bed and walked to the living room. I became more alert. I didn't just hear my cat. I also heard something else that made my stomach churn. Someone was jimmying my locked front door as my cat watched. For the longest time, I couldn't move. I stood there in my living room paralyzed with fear. My thoughts raced and my heartbeat was loud in my ears. Sooner or later, if this person was lucky, they would break into my apartment and do God knows what to me and or steal everything of value. I had to do something, anything to get this person to leave. It took about a minute for me to collect my courage. I was about to do something reckless and possibly stupid. I shakily walked to the door and moved my hand to the light switch next to it and turned on the outside light. This seemed to do the trick. Once the person knew I was home, he proceeded to yell, "Son of a bitch, fuck!" After that outburst, he kicked the door a couple of times, which scared me even more, and I jumped back and fell on my ass. Then he stopped, and everything went silent. Again, I became paralyzed with fear. What was he doing? Is he still here, or did he leave? Oh my God, what if he comes back? Shit. I sat there for 10 minutes, straining my ears for any other suspicious sounds. I was relieved when I didn't hear anything else. Once I was in the right mind and not as panicked as I was earlier, I called the cops. I then found out I wasn't the only person who had almost had their apartment broken into. 4 other tenants that lived in the same complex I did had experienced what I had went through as well. Sadly, the cops never caught the guy, so he's still out there somewhere, and I hope to God that I never have to meet him. The one thing I am thankful for is that Crybaby is such a vocal cat that he was able to wake me up that night. Whether that guy was able to break in or not, I really do think that my cat did save me that night, and I think that I will always triple check to see if my doors are locked at night before I go to bed for the rest of my life. This incident happened in the summer of 2015. I lived by myself in a nice house inside a small town. Low crime, but still the occasional shady fucker. Anyway, at work that day on a smoke break, I watched a dog get thrown from a moving vehicle. 4-lane city traffic during the start of rush hour. I ran straight out there, scooped his little ass up, and booked it back to my workplace. He was not injured, amazingly. As a bleeding heart animal lover, I decided to take him home with me until I could figure out what to do with him. I have a large amount of cats and always have. This was my first experience with a dog that I was solely responsible for. This guy was very shy, head hung, tail tucked, jumpy, just looking at me like I was about to beat him. I was clueless on the subject of dog personalities and tendencies. I just knew they needed to be taken out frequently. His first night with me, we had been out about 15 times, as I didn't want him shitting in my house. I was having my final cigarette of the day on my porch at around 22:30. The dog was on a lead, chilling under my chair as I smoked and poked about on Reddit. I see a man walking on the sidewalk that runs by my house. He kept glancing up at me before passing. Shortly after he passed my house, he stopped, turned his heel and approached. "Hey, can you tell me where 302 Church Street is?" he asked. I told him I would search the address on my phone, which, of course, was taking a minute to pull up. He explained he didn't have a phone of his own and was attempting to get to a friend's house, taking small steps towards me the whole time. Finally, the address I summoned came up. It's exactly 2 blocks north of here, right on the southwest corner of the cross street," I told him, pointing in the direction. He kept his eyes locked on me, continuing to slowly move closer. Doggo starts growling very softly at this point. I had forgotten he was even there until now. mind if I take a look at that map real quick? He grinned sheepishly. I'm bad with directions. I rose from my seat, pointing again. It's truly just 2 blocks up this road. Just follow the road. 2 blocks. The house will be on your left. Making it very clear that I wasn't going to just hand my phone to him. Well, can I call them? I need to let them know I'm coming, he said, still creeping closer, extending his hand. No, I curtly replied. How about text them? Pushing forward still. Dude, no. I started toward my door. Just let me see your phone. He was visibly becoming pissed off, clearly trying to contain it and getting way too close to my porch. As a last-ditch effort of getting this dude to fuck off, I say, you need to get the fuck out of my yard. My dog is protective. He will fuck you up. Hell, I didn't know the first fucking thing about this dog, let alone whether he had the capacity to fuck someone up. I just hoped saying so would intimidate pushy phone guy. And like I said the magic words, Pupper springs into action. A la the wolf creature from the never-ending story, he emerges like a fucking bullet from under the chair, growling, snarling, barking his little ass off. He jerks me damn near off the porch trying to get at this guy. He sounded and acted like an 80-pound attack dog, not a 40-pound timid beagle mix. I was afraid. I didn't know if the pup would turn on me. As stated previously, at the time I knew absolutely jack shit about dogs. He backed his hindquarters into my legs, almost nudging me to the door, still carrying on, eyes locked on Phone Dude and baring his teeth. Phone Dude holds up his hands and backs off, stammers something like, 2 blocks north, yeah? And begins walking that way. I go inside, cut off my lights and peek out the window at him. He glances at my house, assured I'm inside, turns and begins walking the completely opposite direction I pointed him in. Icing on the cake, he pulls a phone from his pocket and raises it to his ears to make a call. Doggo secured his place as a member of my family that night. He is incredibly protective of me and has frightened away another creep since this incident. He is attached at my hip and has made it known that he is grateful to be in a safe, loving home wherein he will never again become a projectile from a moving vehicle. His name now, Hank, and I truly believe that night would have ended very poorly for me had he not been there. This happened 10 years ago. I was 11 at the time. My family had a ground floor flat, and our area had just 24 to 25 families. It was highly secure since it came inside a restricted area for outsiders, so people were rather careless with security issues. No one had a dog in the whole colony, though I loved dogs. A stray dog residing near our colony gave birth to 6 new puppies and kept them in a closeted, shady place very near to our house. And we used to feed the puppies every now and then, though we didn't adopt them. No one adopts stray dogs here, but we did love them a lot. It so happened that once one of my family's office mates came to meet him for some work. He brought ice cream for me and my siblings, but I found his behavior towards me very strange. He kept looking at me again and again, and gave a smile, which was very creepy. I felt very uncomfortable, but I was naive, and I thought maybe the person is too strange by nature and dismissed any bad thoughts. After a few months, 6 to 7, don't remember exactly, it was my summer vacation. My dad was out of station and my mom took my elder sister for a routine checkup. It was just me and my 5-year-old brother at home. I had locked the main door. After some time, somebody rang the bell. I saw through the peephole that it was the same person, my dad's workmate. At first I got freaked out, but then I thought maybe he isn't aware of my parents' absence. So I told him through the window, which is very near to the main door, that I can't open the door as my parents aren't home. He answered that he's aware, and that's why he came. He told me he loves me, which I found so puke-worthy now since I was just 11 back then. I refused. He started banging the door badly, and tried to break the window. I got scared, but that time we had no phones and no one from our neighborhood could hear me if I shouted, since even the nearby houses were also a little far off. My younger brother, who was sleeping at that time, woke up due to all the noise and started crying. I was helpless and didn't know what to do. I was on the verge of crying when I listened, and all the stray dogs were barking at him very aggressively. I went to the window and saw the dogs growling at him and slowly closing in, and before they could jump on him, he quickly got on his bike and rode away. After my mom got back, I told her everything. My dad was called immediately and police were involved. Legal actions were taken on him, but I can never thank those dogs enough. I grew up in southern Mississippi a long time ago, long before cell phones. My stepfather had a job as a trucker for a short while and was off on a job. Mom and I were home alone together often during this time, and he would be on the road, a 9 to 10-year-old girl with a slight woman, not even 5 feet tall. My mother and I were watching TV when our dog, Mandy, who was just sleeping on the floor, suddenly stood up and started growling. She went to the door and growled, then sort of woofed a little, not an actual loud bark, then went over to our window and started pacing rooms, growling and whimpering. She was just a mutt, not any kind of guard dog, and she never acted like this. My mother was instantly on alert. She said, "Sweetheart, I'm going to get my gun." A .38 pistol. "You turn off the lights in the kitchen and the dining room and look out the windows and tell me if you see anything. Stay low." I turned out the lights and then crawled over to the dining room windows, looked out. This side of the yard had our gas tank about 10 feet from the house and a giant oak tree about 10 feet to the left and past the gas tank. It was dark, but I saw a man kind of hunched over, like a cartoon character sneaking, darting from behind the tree to duck down behind the gas tank. I called out to my mother, "He's behind the gas tank, just one guy." I couldn't see anything about him, all dark clothes and a mask on and a hat. She was at the front door at that point, perpendicular to the side I was viewing, and she opened the door and fired 2 shots into the air, not even towards where he was. The guy that ducked behind the gas tank lit the fuck out. I don't think I've ever seen someone run so fast. Then my mom told me she grabbed the phone, of course, heading to go get her gun, but it was dead, so we needed to go get a phone. She said we'd go on 3 and that I should run to the car, get in as fast as I could and lock the door. She did so as well, but was holding the gun still pointed up, very clearly armed. She drove us to the neighbors in the opposite direction the guy had run and called the cops. When they came out to look over the place and all that, they let us know our phone wasn't dead. The phone line going into the house had been cut. I love staying up late. Watching television until 3 a.m. is my bread and butter. Suffice to say, this is a usual thing for me when I'm home alone. With my dad going away for work every 2 weeks and coming home for 1, it was very easy for me to get away with it while I was still in school. And for context, I live with just my dad as my mother passed away from cancer when I was only 12. But I wasn't completely alone though. I had a tuxedo cat with the most fitting moniker, Tuxedo. I've had him since I turned 16, and he's kept me company during the many long Canadian winter nights when I was by myself. His 2 favorite places to sit were the small red couch on the right side of the television and the small table that was placed in front of the large living room window. I also occupied the big red couch right in front of the television. One more important thing to note is that my dad always insisted I close the curtains on the large living room window when it became nighttime. To him, he thought it was dangerous to let people see into the house and could tempt them to break in. But in my mind, I always figured no one would be dumb enough to break into a house with lights on instead of a house with no lights on at all. So, I usually just left them open the entire 2 weeks he was away because laziness. So on this particular night, I was watching a documentary. I think it was about some couple being held hostage somewhere in Australia. These certain documentaries would be on very late, which wasn't a problem for 18-year-old me in the slightest. Tuxedo obviously felt differently as he had chosen to gaze outside the living room window instead. As it had just entered commercial break, Tuxedo started giving off soft cries as his eyes were staring in the direction of the front door, which was on the left side of the window. He usually does this if he sees someone outside at the door, which was more commonly done during the day than night for obvious reasons. It was actually very out of the ordinary for Tuxedo to do this so late. At first, I assumed it may have been an outdoor cat or a wild rabbit by the door, but I could tell Tuxedo's wail was especially worrisome, so I decided to check it out for myself. Here's the layout of my front door entrance. Tuxedo and I were on the top floor, but the entrance was a lower level that was between the top floor and the basement. There was a small staircase that went down from the top floor towards the front door, and a second small staircase that went further down away from the door to the basement. Hopefully that was a good enough explanation. So I'm standing at the top of the staircase, about to go down and open the door to see for myself, when I see a large shadowy figure in the frosted glass of my front door. I nearly collapsed to the ground when I saw this. It was definitely not my dad, and 11 p.m. at night, it was certainly not something I expected to see. I could tell whoever this was had something in the door and was trying to pry it open. At that moment, something came over me that I can't explain. It might have been the fact that I knew I had no one in the house to help me, or the fact that I felt an urgency to protect Tuxedo from this intruder, but I grabbed my cell phone off the arm of the couch and threw on the lights over the front door. The shadowy figure was now fully visible, and clearly startled as our eyes met through the frosted glass, his face displayed in a jagged reflection. "Leave now, or I'm calling the police." I didn't even get to finish before he was dashing off my yard and into a car across the street. Before I could even tell the make and model, let alone a license plate, he was gone. All that remained was a crude crowbar on the front step. Now it's up for debate what the man was at my house for. I certainly didn't recognize him in the few seconds I looked at him. While this definitely shattered my imagined immunity from danger if the lights were still on, part of me wonders if he might have still attacked if I wasn't awake that night. One thing is for sure though, Tuxedo saved my life that night. I don't even want to imagine what might have happened if Tuxedo wasn't looking out the window that night. I lived in a city in central Ohio that has a big college that I live near. I actually attended a different college than the one I mentioned and made the 20-minute drive from the city to that college. I also worked nights as a pizza delivery man in the city and the surrounding suburbs. One night, I had an order in the town where my college is located, which is a smaller suburban city northwest of my home city. Now, this call occurred during what my coworkers and I referred to as the dead hour, which is just before the shop closed at 1 in the morning. I begrudgingly took the pizza, got in the car, and plugged the address into the GPS. I noticed that the house was located off of a back road in what looked like a sparsely populated area. Not thinking much of this, I drove up Route 315 to I-270 East and exited. After passing through downtown, the cemetery, and the college, I drove through some subdevelopments and then on the smaller road where the house was located. The GPS notified me that I had arrived at my destination, but to my surprise, the house was boarded up. I noticed that there was a small shed in the back of the house that had a small window. There was a flickering light in the window. At this point, almost every red flag had gone off in my head, but I knew my hard-ass boss would be pissed if I wimped out on this delivery. So I proceeded towards the shed. As I got closer to the shed, I heard a rustling in the bushes next to the driveway. Then I heard a man whisper, "Here they come, Billy. 45, 45. At that point, a man jumped out of the bushes and 2 other men jumped out of the shed. They were carrying knives and were wearing these long robes and white masks. I made it back to the car just in time, but one of the assailants managed to slit my arm. As I escaped, I could see the assailant standing in the middle of the road looking pissed. I probably drove 90 miles per hour on the way back. When I got to the shop, everyone looked shocked. After explaining everything to them, we contacted the police and they dispatched a few officers to the house. When they got there, the assailants were gone. They found some strange drug paraphernalia in the shed, and some ropes and various other strange equipment. What they were to be used for, I have no idea. This happened when I was about 14. I had just started babysitting for this family in my neighborhood. They had 2 kids, a boy who was 10 at the time, and a girl who at the time was 8. They were great kids to babysit. They got along with each other without fighting, and always did what I asked of them without complaining. Before I launch into what happened, I'm going to give you all some background information about this family's house so you can understand why I was so freaked out. The house is situated pretty far back in my neighborhood on this little side street off of the main road that runs through the neighborhood. The house is in a cul-de-sac, so there's not a lot of traffic on this road at all. Usually, the only people that ever come into the cul-de-sac are the mailman and people who lived in the other 3 houses that were in the cul-de-sac. The street itself was not very long at all, so there were only 3 houses on each side of the street that weren't in the cul-de-sac. Essentially, despite being in a large neighborhood, the street that this house was situated on was very quiet, and if you didn't live in the neighborhood, you might not know that the street existed. It was a fall Friday night. I'm pretty sure it was late November, right after Thanksgiving, and I had arrived at the house around 6 p.m. The kids were already sitting down eating dinner when I got there, and the parents told me that they expected to be home around midnight or so. The parents also made a joke about how the kids had the whole street to themselves, since the other families that lived there were out of town for Thanksgiving. The parents left, the kids finished eating, and we went outside to play in the cul-de-sac. I remember locking the front door and taking the house key outside with me. The kids rode around on their scooters for about an hour. For some reason, I just felt really on edge while the kids were playing outside. I chalked this feeling up to knowing that we were alone on the street since everyone else was out of town. After the kids finished playing outside, we went inside to play Wii in the basement. I remember locking the front door once we were back inside and putting the key on the kitchen counter. I then checked the front door before I went downstairs to the basement. I was super vigilant about checking the doors because I had watched so many scary movies where the babysitter forgets to lock the door and then some crazy murderer gets into the house, blah blah blah. As the kids are playing in the basement, I get that unsettling feeling again. I didn't feel like we were being watched. It was more like when you know that something is going to pop out in a scary movie and you're just anticipating it on the edge of your seat, with tension at its highest. The feeling sticks with me the entire time that we're in the basement, but again, I chalk it up to the knowing that the entire street is empty. The clock strikes 10 and it's time for the kids to head to bed. We go to the top floor of the house where the kids' bedrooms are. The house is set up so that when you open the front door of the house and come inside, you're standing in the foyer with the steps to go to the top floor directly in front of you. If you're standing in the foyer, you can see all the way up the stairs into the bathroom and on the top floor. So the kids are in the bathroom brushing their teeth, and we all hear a car pull into their driveway. I figured that it's their parents coming home super early, and I expect to hear the garage door start opening, but that sound never comes. I walk into the girl's bedroom and look out her front window. There's a car running in the driveway, and there's a man in the car, but the headlights are turned off despite it being 10 p.m. and it's pitch black dark outside. I figured it was someone who just got lost in our neighborhood and was just using the driveway to stop and get their bearings before heading back out on the road. I leave the girl's bedroom and head back to the bathroom where the kids are. Suddenly, I hear a knock on the front door. I turn around and there's a man standing at their door holding a pizza box. There are 2 long windows on either side of their front door, so I have a clear view of this guy, and I know that he has a clear view of us. I immediately get that eerie feeling that I had been feeling all night. I asked both of the kids if they ordered a pizza for some reason, and they both said no. These kids were always very honest and wouldn't lie about something like that or even order a pizza without asking me, so I knew they were being truthful. Normally I would have gone downstairs to see what this guy wanted. Maybe he had the wrong house and I could point him in the right direction, but that little voice in my head was screaming, "Don't go downstairs. Do not open that door." The guy also looked like he didn't work for any pizza company. Normally they would be wearing a uniform or a hat with the company's logo on it, or something. This guy just seemed off. He looked like he was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, and looked super disheveled. His shirt was really wrinkled. His pants were filthy and ripped, and he had this ratty black baseball cap that was pulled down super far so that his eyes were covered. He was also grinning really aggressively, like I thought this guy's teeth would just shatter because of how hard he was pressing them together. At this point, the kids notice him and start asking why he's here. Should we open the door, etc., etc. I tell them no, and ask that they just go to their rooms and lie down. The boy goes to his room, and I walk the girl into her room and look out the window at the car again. I notice that the car doesn't have one of those pizza delivery car signs on the top, which all of the pizza companies in my town require delivery drivers to have. So now I feel really confident in my initial intuition that this guy isn't a legit pizza delivery guy. The girl gets in bed, and I come back out of her room and sit down at the top of the stairs so that I can keep an eye on this guy. I tried to stay really calm so as not to upset the kids, even though I was flipping out on the inside. He's still standing at the door holding the pizza box in one hand, and he's still grinning that teeth-shattering grin. His mouth was almost too big for his face, I thought. Even though I can't see his eyes because of the hat, I know that he's dead-ass staring at me. Then, without breaking eye contact, he starts jiggling the door handle pretty aggressively while still grinning. I silently thank God that I was so psychotic about making sure the front door was locked. He stops jiggling the handle and resumes staring at me. If I was in this situation now, I probably would have called the police immediately, but being only 14 and fairly new to babysitting, I was paralyzed with fear. I felt like if I took my eyes off of him for a second, when I looked back, he would be standing at the base of the stairs. After about another 5 minutes of the stare down, he literally starts walking backwards off of the porch without breaking eye contact. Legit, this dude is walking backwards towards his car while still staring at me. I go into the parents' bedroom, which also has a view of the driveway, kneel down in front of the window and peek out. I'm expecting to see this guy getting into his car. Nope. The guy is nowhere in sight, but the car is still there. So I return to my perch at the top of the stairs, half expecting to see him at the door again, or worse, standing at the bottom of the stairs. But he was nowhere to be seen. After about 20 minutes, I hear a car starting. I run back to the parents' room, kneel in front of the window again, and notice that the car in the driveway has started, and the guy is sitting in the driver's seat, still fucking grinning. He also doesn't turn the headlights on. He shifts into reverse and begins slowly backing out of the driveway, grinning the entire time. Right before he drives off, he turns his head, and I swear to God, makes direct eye contact with me again. And again, I can't see his eyes because of the hat, but I know that he was looking directly at me. This is really disturbing to me since he didn't really know where I was in the house. The parents' bedroom is in the farthest window to the right if you're looking at the house from outside. The lights in the parents' bedroom are off, and I'm kneeling down. So really, the only part of me that might potentially be visible is the top of my head, my eyes, and my nose. But it's also pitch black outside. He doesn't have his headlights on, and it's pitch black in the parents' bedroom, so I doubt that I was really visible. He also didn't spend time scanning the windows. His head literally just snapped to where I was. It was like he could sense that I was looking at him. After I had time to calm down and collect myself, I started replaying what had just happened and came to the following conclusions. This guy was not a pizza delivery guy. He had no uniform, looked and acted like he was possessed or something, and his car was unmarked. Those 20 minutes or so that elapsed between when he walked backwards off of the porch to when he got into the car were probably spent walking around the house and checking all of the doors, trying to gain entry. He had malicious intent. Maybe he wanted to rob the house. Maybe he wanted to do something more sinister to me or the kids. Either way, this guy was bad news, and I'm glad I trusted the voice in my head. I think he probably found some pizza box and tried to pose as a pizza delivery guy to get me to open the door for him so that he could strike. There are still some parts of the story that are confusing me. If he really wanted to get inside the house, why didn't he find a rock, a brick, or something else to throw through the window? I mean, I'm very glad that he didn't, but I just thought it was a bit odd that he checked the doorknobs and then gave up after he discovered that they were all locked. Maybe he felt like doing something that made a lot of noise that would alert me, and so he could try to sneak in a more subtle way to catch me off guard. Why did he walk backwards up the porch? Was it just to preserve eye contact and thus intimidate me? Or was this dude just insane? Why did I feel so unsettled early on in the evening before this guy even showed up? Was he watching the house and waiting for the kids to go to bed and for me to be off guard before trying to get into the house? How did he know where to look when he was backing out of the driveway? Why was he grinning the entire time? Did he know that our house was the only house on the street that was inhabited at that time? Why did he pick that house, especially given the fact that it's on a very quiet and secluded street and you have to drive pretty far to the back of the neighborhood to even reach the street? He could have picked the 50 or other so houses that you have to pass to even get to that house. The town where I live is upper middle class and has a super low crime rate, and drugs aren't really an issue. We're also surrounded by other similar upper middle class areas, so I'm doubtful that this person was on drugs or some crazy vagrant. Of course, I could be wrong. Maybe this dude was just jacked up on drugs. Maybe he was just a vagrant dude. Maybe he really was just a lost pizza delivery man with some unsettling personal quirks. But I'm really doubtful. So I'm a pizza delivery girl. Easy enough. I was at work around 9:30 p.m. when this guy calls. Very whispery, breathing voice. I do my usual, "Thank you for calling Pizza Hut. This is Karen. How are you doing tonight?" After the usual exchange, I find out he is ordering for delivery. He is a new customer, so I had to put in all of his information. Nothing weird. He tells me he has a coupon for a pizza and asks if I can give him the discount. I told him, "Let me grab my manager and we'll take care of that for you." He asked for me specifically to take care of him. After I came back from dealing with my boss, I told him that we discounted him for his coupon. He thanked me. Here's where it gets weird. He stopped me mid-sentence and told me that I have a very nice sounding tone of voice and that he loved hearing me talk and you should be a disc jockey. I was a little weirded out, but I tried to stay professional. I told him that it was very sweet and I would consider it. He said, "I'd listen to your radio station. Thank you for taking my order tonight. I'll stop by your store and see you sometime soon, Karen." I wish I would say it was over, but that isn't true. Note that this man lives in an apartment complex. What I didn't realize is I had taken the complex's address, but not his apartment number. Not 5 minutes later, the man calls back, and my coworker Belay answers the phone. I had learned after the fact that he had asked for me by name. I picked up the phone and did my greeting, and he reminded me I forgot to ask for his apartment number. Nothing weird yet. Again, I thanked him and changed the information. Before I could hang up, this was our conversation. Karen: "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" "Are you doing all right?" "Yes, sir. I'm great." "Good. I'm going to hang up now. See you soon." Belay heard the whole story and told my boss to have my male coworker take it. This is what Bob came back with. "First thing he said to me is asking where you were." Okay, so I got there, right? And I knock on the door. He asked in this weird, seductive voice, "Come in." but I was not about to go in this guy's house, so I knock again. He opened the door with a big smile on his face, but saw it was me and had just dropped. I greeted him and he said, "Oh, where's Karen?" I told him you were here at the store, and he just looked upset. After I took his money and gave him his food, he asked how you were. I told him you were doing all right, and he just said, "Good. Karen is a sweet girl. Tell her I'll see her soon." The fact that he had asked the driver to come in and that he was expecting me creeps me out. Maybe he's just lonely and wants someone to talk to, but still, add one more creep to my list. For my first job, I worked as a delivery driver and dishwasher at a mom and pop's pizza shop. The shop is within walking distance of my apartment, which I just got alone. The shop is owned by a foreign man and his 2 nephews and another friend of theirs. I was the only female in the entire building. At first, the owner asked me to change into my work shirt the first day, in the walk-in freezer. I declined and put it on in the bathroom. He supervised me delivering pizzas and put his arm around my chair and told me to join him and the workers after work for drinks. I politely declined. I wasn't even old enough to drink. He asked if I had a boyfriend, which I did at the time, and I told him yes, he just lived in another state. He then offered his worker to sleep on my couch because he didn't have a place to stay, without consulting me. I obviously protested and declined. He also told me that he knew my boyfriend's name, which he did, which I never told him. As time went on, things got weirder. The owner would take me out back, where there were no cameras, and scold me for not pouring bleach into the dishes I was washing. I told him that you can't stick your hands in the bleach, but he didn't care. He would take me out back after my shift and compliment my eyeglasses and tell me how beautiful I was. I would say thanks, back away, and drive home every time. He came up behind me as I was washing dishes and blew on the back of my neck, and then proceeded to tell me that, since I live alone, didn't inform him of this, that I should be careful. He then stated that he knew the exact layout of the apartment because his friend lives there. I told him I had a male roommate. I didn't, and he chuckles and told me I did not, and that he was going to break into my apartment. I was stunned and had 4 deliveries waiting for me to drop them off. On the way out the door, his nephew muttered something about me being a girl. I threw the pizza bags into the car and promptly pulled over, had a panic attack and dropped all 5 pizzas and whatever else I was delivering at the first house and didn't give a shit. I went home to my apartment, called my mom, and sat in the kitchen with a hammer for safety. Someone was knocking on my front door, but I didn't look to see who. I already had a feeling. Then, the pizza shop called me repeatedly. I left my eyeglasses in the shop and had their pizza bags. My dad went into the store, took the pizza bags back, and threatened the owner, saying he has no problem going back to jail. My dad brought back my glasses. Months later, I ran into the nephew at my college campus, and he proceeded to make unending, uncomfortable eye contact until we passed each other. After the incidents, I got a huge 100-pound American bulldog that kept me safe until the day she died. The pizza shop is still open for business, and I'm still living in my apartment. Needless to say, I don't order pizza from that shop anymore. I attend a college that is located in one of the poorest cities in Northern California. The campus is relatively safe since the school employs its own Department of Public Safety, but after the sun sets, it's usually a good call to remain indoors because that's when the townies come out and they tend to wander into campus. About 2 years ago, I was living in an apartment complex in the main part of campus, and I still didn't have a car yet. It was the end of the fall semester, and I was the last person in my apartment of 3 girls to finish taking finals, so I was home alone since my roommates had already gone home for winter break. I got back from taking my last exam and followed my usual routine of dejectedly collapsing into bed to cry and sleep off the effects of pulling an all-nighter. When I finally woke up, it was already past 10 p.m. and I was starving. Unfortunately, the student grocery store and cafeteria were closed for the day, and I had nothing in the apartment to eat and no car to get food elsewhere. I was woefully poking around the fridge in the hopes that I would find something substantial to tide me over until morning, when I noticed a Domino's coupon that someone had stuck to the freezer. My stomach's pathetic cries for sustenance had been answered. I quickly decided that there was no shame in ordering a whole pizza plus Cinesticks for myself because 1, I was ravenous, and 2, the completion of finals demanded some sort of celebration, and 3, if anyone happened to ask, I was going to lie and say I was sharing it with a friend or something along those lines. Anyway, I eagerly ordered up my feast for 1 and provided the cashier with my address, apartment, and cell number. I typically never give out my number to anyone, but I had ordered delivery from Domino's in the past, and I knew that they needed my number to call me once more when they were outside because the drivers always got lost navigating through campus. About 20 minutes later, I got the call. My food was here. For reference, it's now close to midnight and the campus was pretty much dead since most students had gone home. The driver told me that he had parked in front of a dorm building that was right across the street from my apartment. I hustled out of my apartment and was going down the stairs when I spotted the delivery guy waiting outside of his car with my pizza. At this point, my sense of caution kicked in and I slowed my pace as my brain took in the fact that there were no other students out, the lighting was bad, and I was essentially walking up to a stranger in his car that still had his engine running. As I neared the bottom of the steps, I silently hoped that he would cross the street and approach me so that I wouldn't have to get near the car. Of course, that didn't happen. I made my way across the street and was finally able to get a good look at him. He was a relatively short Hispanic guy, maybe 5'7" to 5'9", in his early 20s, and my nerves were getting bombarded by the creeper vibes he was giving off. I can only compare it to the vibe that you get when you're out clubbing and you suddenly spot the guy lurking in the crowd sporting the slicked back ponytail, sunglasses, oversized shirt, and sagged pants combo who just so happens to be headed in your direction. I did my best to appear calm and keep the mood light and friendly. He made some comments about how late it was and how no one was around, but I just signed the receipt as quickly as possible, gave him my thanks and an awkward smile, and hightailed it out of there as soon as he handed me my food. I could feel him watching me as I climbed the stairs back to my place. Once I got back into my apartment, I locked and chained up the door and sat down on the living room couch to calm myself. After a few moments, I shrugged off the situation and reasoned that it was just my paranoia and overactive imagination acting up again. I had just turned on the television and was about to take my first bite of pizza when I got a text from an unknown number. It read, "You're hella sexy." I connected the dots and matched the text number to the call I had received earlier from the pizza delivery guy. My initial reaction, of course, was shock since nothing like this has ever happened to me before, but that eventually melted away into laughter and disbelief when I considered my appearance at the time. Like I had mentioned earlier, I had just woken up from my nap after taking my last final. I was wearing a pair of raggedy sweatpants and loose sweatshirt, and my hair was nappy and tied into a messy ponytail. My face was probably greasier than the pizza I was eating, and to top it off, I had my glasses on. Definitely not a pretty picture, much less anything that could even come close to resembling hella sexy. The next morning I got a call from my boyfriend John, and I casually told him about the pizza delivery driver, who casually signed his name in the text as Phildo, and the events that had transpired the previous evening. After sheepishly trying to defend my actions on the basis of poor judgment caused by extreme hunger and promising never to do that type of thing again, John convinced me that I should report it to the campus police as a precautionary measure. I gave them a call, and an officer stopped by my apartment a few hours later. I relayed my story, he took some pictures of the text message, and he wrote down Phildo's phone number. The officer then told me that he would contact the Domino's if I wanted him to, but that it would most likely result in Phildo's termination. I was still relatively unfazed by the whole situation, and I told the officer I just wanted to make sure that this creep never did this to any other girls on campus, but at the same time, I didn't want him to lose his job. The officer then started asking me questions about how I felt after my encounter. Questions along the lines of, do you feel threatened by Fildo? Do you feel safe in your apartment with the knowledge that Fildo has both your phone number and your exact address? If I wasn't scared before, I definitely was now, and during the course of my questioning, I had broken out in a cold sweat, and my traitorous imagination began conjuring up all sorts of dastardly situations that ended in my untimely demise. Obviously, I ended up giving the officer the go-ahead to pursue my case and contact the Dominoes. About a month later, while I was at home celebrating the holidays, I got a call from my boyfriend. I had left him the keys to my apartment so that he could store his bike there and crash in my room while I was away. He told me that he had stopped by my place, but that he couldn't get in because the keys weren't working. He also said that it looked like someone had broken in because there was some glass on the floor and a wooden board across my living room window. I was pretty upset because this was my first time hearing about it, so I called the school the next day to figure out what the hell had happened. Housing transferred my call to the public safety department, and the officer I spoke with was only able to tell me that, according to their records, a maintenance worker had called them 2 days after I had headed home to report my broken window. Public safety had responded by boarding up the window and changing the lock when they noticed it had been tampered with. I convinced the officer to let my boyfriend into the apartment so he could go check and see if anything was stolen, and thankfully, nothing was. My gut tells me that it was Fildo who did it. It was Fildo who tried to pick my lock and then broke my window. It scares me even more now when I consider the fact that nothing had been stolen. My flat-screen TV was right by the window that had been broken, and my boyfriend's fancy road bike was sitting right there in the living room. Why didn't he steal anything? Does that mean his intentions were to break in and get his revenge on me, the girl that had cost him his job? Would this still have happened if I had not given the officer permission to pursue the case? I try not to spend too much time speculating about what Fildo's true intentions were, but when I do, it still makes my heart race when I think about what could have happened if I'd still been in my apartment at the time. This was about 6 months ago in the summer, Southern Hemisphere here. I tend to order a fair bit of pizza since hunger is a thing, and pizza is pretty much my only option for delivery since I don't drive. Now, I'm the kind of girl who doesn't wear pants if I don't have to. Oh, the weather's about 25 degrees, no pants for me. I have one pair of shorts that I love to wear, but only around the house, so obviously I put those on as I'm expecting a pizza delivery and can't exactly open the door pantless. I open the door, accept the pizza, and begin eating my dinner by the television. Not too long into my meal, I get a message on my phone. I've deleted the messages, of course, but in the first message, the sender calls me by name, which is strange as I prefer my nickname, and asks if I'm home alone often with a winky face. Okay, way creepy. Who is this person? Between me asking who on earth they are and how they got my number, probably a mistake on my part, they begin to describe exactly what I was wearing, and I get a horrible sinking feeling. This person has my number, my name, and how I'm dressed. I realize that the only way they could know this is if they were the guy who delivered my pizza, as I had to use my name and number to order. And if that's the case, this person knows where I live too. I put the number into Google and check the first few results. They're a local, and I've actually seen this person around on one of the buy, swap, sell pages on Facebook. Realizing they were in my town was the worst part, and they were literally in a good position to stalk, harass, or continue to be creepy as hell. I ended up drawing all the blinds, crawling into bed, and pretty much making myself into a blanket burrito, staying as still as I could for a few hours. I was genuinely scared out of my wits. Thankfully, I've yet to hear from this person again after threatening police action. So I work at a pizza place, usually inside, as my insurance does not cover claims when driving for business. But occasionally I will cover a delivery shift for one of the drivers because the money is good. Our delivery area includes a few new development, upper-middle-class, cookie-cutter neighborhoods, an older 1940s-era village, 2 apartment complexes, some trailer parks, and a bunch of rural areas. Not rural to the point of seeing hundreds of stars at night, but enough that you couldn't hear your neighbors yell. So about a week ago I was covering a delivery shift. I come back to the shop feeling pretty good. I'm averaging $5 a delivery and they have all been pretty close, and check to see if I have any more deliveries. I have one to an address I have never seen before. We have mostly semi-regulars get deliveries, so an address that doesn't seem the least bit familiar is odd. It's out on one of the more rural roads. I asked the kid who took the order what was up because there were special instructions on the ticket. He says, "They said go around back because the front door, I guess, isn't operational." I'm like, okay, that's not that uncommon. People often want you to go around back. Either they're painting the door, the house shifted and it's a bitch to open, or they're just hanging out back. So as I'm driving out to the house, I get an odd feeling, and I don't really like the idea of going to the back of some house in the sticks. It would all be too easy for some thugs to order a pizza to an abandoned house. There are quite a few in the more rural areas, then jump the delivery guy. I figured I'll scope the place out when I get there, and if it seems sketchy, just call them and make up some bull about how it's against company policy to go around back of houses to prevent robberies. As I'm driving to the house, I realize it's towards the end of this road that gets less populated the further down you go. Great. I'm pretty near the address and driving slow. I see this house abandoned looking and set up from the roads with no address and in a bunch of trees. I think, that house better not be it. So I drive past and check the next house's address, and lo and behold, that abandoned looking one was the right house. Shit. At this point I'm not super worried though, because out in the boonies the standards of upkeep on your house are pretty low, so a house in disrepair isn't unusual. So I double back to this house and pull into the driveway. At this point I'm getting bad vibes. It just doesn't feel right. So I park my car at the very end of the driveway with the rear of the car on the shoulder so anyone passing can clearly see it. At this point I call back to the shop and tell them I'm at this sketchy house, and if I don't call back in 4 or 5 minutes, call me, and if I don't answer, call the cops. While I am on the phone, I take a chance to take a good look at the house. It looks extremely abandoned, and not just in disrepair. The driveway is crumbling. Bits are gravel and there are weeds growing out of it. There is no mailbox, no trash cans, no car, no lawnmowers, no landscaping, no kids' toys, absolutely nothing in the yard. The yard hasn't been mowed in what looks like years. The house is total crap. The roof is all but falling apart. The siding is falling apart. The back deck, which comes around the side, is falling apart. And the only part of the house that looks even a little bit decent is the allegedly non-functioning front door. The windows are all shut. It's 95 degrees and humid, and this place does not have AC. They all have the blinds or curtains shut, the few that aren't actually boarded up. I don't even see any wires running to this house. It's not dark, but it's dusk, and there isn't a sign of any lights on in the house. At this point, I'm starting to get pretty nervous. I am a 5'10" male, 180 pounds, not in any great shape, but I did take karate for 10 years, so I'm not helpless, but I do try to avoid any sort of confrontation as I can, as I'm mostly a pacifist. I'm not too concerned about getting robbed, no skin off my teeth that's not my money. I mean, I would rather not get robbed, but I'm mostly worried about getting jumped or killed. It's a fairly safe area, but recently there have been some more rather unsavory people moving in from the city. A big spike in home invasions and robberies, but more worrying, a few stabbings and assaults. So it's time to either nut up or shut up. So I'm not about to go charging in there like a fool, so I get out my phone and call the number they gave when ordering. While I'm doing that, I'm also getting the pizza out and make sure to leave my door open. A running car half in the road at an abandoned house with the door open looks suspicious, right? I figured if shit does go down, it might look out of place enough to make someone stop. Not that there really is any traffic this far down the road. I'm starting to walk up to the house while the phone rings. It rings twice, and then an automated message comes on. It says something along the lines that this number is associated with an internet texting app, the free ones you download and let you send free texts from a different phone number over a data connection. I think it was haywire. We have had issues with people using numbers from those services for pranks in the past. This is a huge red flag. My heart is now pounding in my throat, and my whole body is telling me to bail. I don't want to get a reputation of being a flaky bitch as a driver and lose any future delivery shifts, and that is why I have not bailed yet. So I'm just standing there holding a pizza looking at this house, but not wanting to venture around to the back of it. I'm hoping that the resident will look out the window and come out by the road to get their food. I'm looking at the front windows, checking for some signs of life. I see a blind go up on the one window next to the front door, and a really creepy looking guy with a hat pulled low and big sunglasses on is looking out. Remember, he is in a completely dark house surrounded by trees at dusk. There is no reason for him to be wearing sunglasses. I also see what appears to be a big guy standing right behind him in the room. This could have been anything though. When he sees me looking, he mouths something and he darts away, presumably towards the allegedly broken front door. At this point, I got the fuck out of there. I had stayed pretty close to my car, so it was only a few steps away, so I jumped into the driver's seat and threw the pizza into my passenger seat, something I would never really do since I'm really anal about keeping my car clean. I slam into reverse before I get the clutch all the way in, so I grind my gears a little, again something I never do. Without looking, I simultaneously slam and lock my door and floor it backwards onto the main road, slipping my clutch horribly, but at this point, I don't care. I don't want to fuck around and risk a stall. I didn't even check for cross traffic, really stupid on my part. I start to drive away and look back at the house. The screen door on the outside of the front door is now open, but the front is still shut. The guy isn't out in the yard yelling, "Wait, come back," or anything. He's just gone. So I pull over a little ways up the road to call back to shop and tell them I'm all good and I'll elaborate when I get back. The people never called back to inquire about their food. People usually call if their pizza is 15 minutes late, and these people never got it, so it's really strange they didn't call, pretty much confirming they were up to no good. After telling my coworkers about it, we conclude it was definitely a robbery at the very least, so we put the address and phone number on our no deliveries list and ate their pizza. Now, I doubt I would have actually gotten murdered or anything. Robbed with maybe a gun pulled or a little roughing up, yes, but it was still very unnerving that I easily could have gotten into some serious trouble by just doing my job, especially if the idiots picked a slightly less abandoned house to set up at. So a few weeks ago, I got a new job as a pizza delivery guy. Pretty cool, $8 an hour. So I'm told to go deliver a pizza to some apartment complex, nothing out of the ordinary. Upon knocking on the door, a pretty cute girl opens up and smiles. Suddenly, this delivery is turning out pretty sweet. I tell her the price and she says, yeah, I got the money in my room, and asks me to come in to wait. Now, in any other circumstance, I'd say no, because that's the safe and smart thing to do. But hell, this girl was cute. Plus, what could she do that would hurt me? Well, she returns from her room with the money, smiling at me, and then she drops the change and slowly bends down to pick it up. She's flaunting her rack in a tank top, and when she comes back up, she's smiling. She gives me the cash, and this is how the conversation went after. "You're cute." "Thanks, you too," I say. "Can I have your number?" "I barely know you." "Why don't you hang for a bit and we could talk?" Alright, but only for like 10 minutes. Well, she led me back to her room, and we were going to share the pizza, but as soon as we get back there, she has all this BDSM stuff. Handcuffs, choker chains, dirty panties, whips, etc. lying around. I kind of froze as soon as I took it all in, and then I said something like, "Oh, never mind, gotta go," and got the fuck out of there. I guess the lesson I learned is that even if someone looks like they're harmless and not creepy, there's still the small chance that they are. Never trust a stranger, no matter how good they may appear. Back around when I was 10, it was not uncommon for me and my siblings to dig around outside. On this particular day, I was tired out from the day before and decided to stay inside. I would occasionally go look outside to make sure everyone was okay and doing well. I was a paranoid small child due to some former trauma I had experienced as a smaller child. Well, after about my third glance outside, my cousin and brother were standing at the end of the gravel drive talking to some pizza man. I turned to my mother and asked if we had ordered pizza, maybe as a surprise. My mom turned to the door and bolted outside yelling. The sounds of tires screeching could be heard. My mom came back inside with my brother, cousin, and sister. After asking what had happened, my brother and cousin went on to explain that the pizza boy they explained to be around his late 20s had asked the boys if they wanted some free pizza. Of course, being small kids, they were readily willing to accept such an offer. He told them the pizzas were in the back, and if they wanted them, they would have to get in. That is luckily when my mom ran towards the car yelling random obscenities. And thankfully, whoever he was sped off. Two weeks ago, I was home alone and the doorbell rang. I asked who it was, and the guy said, "Oh, it's pizza delivery." I didn't order a pizza, and when I looked at the people, he was indeed carrying a pizza box. I told him I didn't order any pizza, and he left, looked out my window, and I see him cross the street to my neighbor's house. Didn't think anything of it since I thought maybe they were the ones who ordered the pizza, so I went back to doing what I was doing, which was playing video games. Turns out, the guy robbed my neighbors because they weren't home. Pretty scary stuff. I probably could have stopped it if I called the police, and to think of it, he was carrying a Little Caesars box, which is pickup only. As a third-year university student, I like to think that pizza, gyros, and hamburgers are important staples of my cost-effective and not really nutritious nutritional needs. Needless to say, it wasn't long before I became besties with the guys running the local pizza parlor 3 blocks from my house. The guys were super cool. I met them for the first time when my best friend Sharon, or Cher, and I went in to buy a pizza for our movie night. I wasn't too jazzed on the movie night because my, let's be honest, roommate Sam insisted on joining in. No, I'm not homophobic. Cher is the biggest lesbian out there. She thinks I have a very nice butt. I was Sam-phobic though. She decided pretty early on that I was hiding my true lesbian nature and had been trying to get me to accept myself for what she believed me to be for like 3 months. This meant that movie nights with Sam mostly consisted of the one where Cuba Gooding Jr. goes on a gay cruise, the one with the chick working in a flower shop, and the one where Nikki from Orange is the New Black is a high school cheerleader rooting for her own team. So I wasn't too stoked on the movie night. These mostly ended up in deep conversations about the importance of revealing your true sexuality, and neither was Cher because Sam had a way of making things really fucking awkward. Sam would later go on to tell Cher's girlfriend of 5 years that Cher was cheating on her in an attempt to break them up so that she could later help Cher pick up the pieces. Cher's kind of a total babe. I told these pizza dudes about my roommate and her crazy movie night antics, and they tried to help us out by inviting Cher and I to come back at midnight to watch a horror movie on their projector that they had set up in the dining area. I'm pretty big on horror movies, so to me it sounded like an awesome idea. Cher thought the opposite, and that it sounded like a plot to kidnap and murder us. We were going. Over the next couple of months, I became really tight with the guys, and I would come over every Friday night for scary movie night and discounted pizza. The dudes were cool and a good way to get time away from Sam, who had taken to tracking my movements like Dog the Bounty Hunter. The guys were pretty successful with their pizza business, and pretty soon they had to hire on more drivers, which is when I met Bill. Bill is pretty much your stereotypical old guy who failed at life. He was in his 40s, but he looked like he was pushing 60. He was constantly high and never showed up to work on time, but always had a really measly and long-winded excuse full of anecdotes of why his life as a pizza delivery guy was so hard. Customers hated him too. When they opened their front door, he would push his way into the house and put their pizza on the kitchen counter table, something he thought would get him a bigger tip. He wouldn't leave their front door until they gave him what he felt like was a big enough tip. If they didn't have money, then he'd tell them that they could tip him in pot. If they didn't have that, then he'd start to yell at them for being cheap assholes. One night I was studying and had to order instead of going out. Normally the guys only sent the cool delivery guys to my place, but that night the rotation hit Bill. He stood in my doorway chatting me up for a long time and told me the guys called him Big Bill for a reason. So obviously Bill needed to get fired like yesterday. The guys do what they have to do and give him notice. I come into the shop on Bill's last working night and talk to my buddy Pete about the firing. Apparently Bill was taking it really well and was just about to finish his last delivery of the night. I hung around to talk to Pete about his troubles with his crazy girlfriend, actually a pretty nice lady. Bill comes in while we're talking and tries to join in the conversation. I was standing at the counter with Pete behind and Bill at my side. Bill starts offering me rides home. I declined because, hey, dude gives me the skeevies. He kept insisting that it was on his way, but I just kept telling him that it was only a 15-minute walk and that I'd be fine. He started to get pouty and then said that I didn't want to get into his car with him because I thought he was creepy. He hit the nail on the head, but since this is Canada and we're polite to a fault, I just laughed it off and insisted that I'd just really rather not. Bill kept pouting and then went outside to have a smoke in his car. On the way out, he grabbed my ass. This sort of abuse isn't uncommon for my bum, but it still pisses me off to no end when it happens. As soon as Bill was out the door and halfway to his car, I told Pete about the ass grab. Pete was a total dude about it and told me that it was a good ass and that he probably would have done the same if he had the balls. I was pissed as a wet cat and it was getting late, so I started to trudge back home. At the crosslight, a gray piece of junk that I recognized as Bill's car drove up to me. Bill rolled down his window and asked if I was sure that I didn't want to ride. Even after his charming ass grabbing, I was still pretty keen on not getting in the car with him. Who would have thought, eh? So once again I said, "No thanks, dude." And he pulled a right, presumably to loop back into the back parking lot of the pizza shop. He shot me a smile and a creepy little wave. I hated that dude. I kept on walking until I reached the next crosswalk. When I was halfway across, a gray little shit beater drove up behind me and blasted on the horn. The car drove on past me, so I figured it was just Bill being an aggressive dick like usual. I walked down the main street, keeping my eye out for him until I reached the gate leading from the street to the backyard of my house. I'm usually pretty nervous entering the backyard because it's as dark as the bottom of the ocean in that bitch, so I grabbed my keys between my fingers for a makeshift pair of brass knuckles, just in case. All was good in the backyard, but when I turned the corner to reach the front of the house, I saw a gray, shitty shit beater parked on the curb. One thought went through my head. Fuck. So I'm not super rational, and even though I was standing right at the entrance to my landlord's basement suite, I instead bolted an extra 20 feet to my front door. I felt like I was going 1,000,000 miles per hour, and that he was going at like 0.3 Michael Myers paces per minute. Michael Myers is one slowly but surely motherfucker. I reached the door and fumbled my keys when I heard his car door shut. I dropped my keys on the fucking ground. I whipped down to pick them up and I heard him whistle. I jammed the keys into my door, turned and slammed that shit behind me as fast as I could and turned the lock. Suddenly, everything got really quiet. I didn't turn on any of the lights. I just went to the front window and watched. I couldn't make Bill out, but I could see that he was in his car from the lit end of his cigarette. I called for Sam, but he wasn't home, so instead I called Pete on the phone. Our conversations basically went like this. Pardon my excessive use of the French language. Generic Italian mob boss Pizza Pete here. What can I... Fuck, shit, Pete. What the fuck? Fucking Bill followed me home, man. Fuck. Whoa, what? Fucking creepy ass-grabbing fucking Bill is outside my fucking house. Dude, he's supposed to be on the other side of town. I asked him to do a delivery at 10 Mile like 20 minutes ago. Well, he's fucking here. He's probably just pulling this shit because he thinks you're pretty and it's his last shift. Are you sure it's him? It's not like my town has a shortage of gray beater cars, but I think I had seen this one enough times in one night to make a positive ID. Yeah, dude, it's like definitely him. Okay, I can be over there in like 15 minutes. Okay, see you soon. I hung up on Pete and moved away from the big front window so that I could hide in my room where I could look through a smaller window that he was less likely to see me in. All of our doors lock and are really heavy duty, so I felt pretty secure in my own room. I didn't turn on my bedroom lights, but I crumpled once I locked the door. I sat there for a little bit trying to calm down my breathing. I heard my landlord watching a movie downstairs in his living room, but I didn't get up until I heard the doorbell. The only way to reach the door to the downstairs suite was to walk down the stairs leading to the front door and then take the next set of stairs down. I was fucking determined to get my landlord, a way bigger guy than Pete, but I needed to get past our windowed front door first, where Bill would be able to see me if I was at the door. At this moment I was pretty scared, and being scared makes me angry, so I essentially said fuck it to myself and went down the stairs to the front door. I could see his head and the left half of his body through the window pane. He saw me trying to sneak past and called out, "Hey baby, it's me, Bill, from the pizza shop. Pete sent me over with a free pizza for you." I immediately declined that offer right down the stairs to my landlord's door. I knocked and he groggily opened it up for me. I told him the situation, which basically went like, "Dude, creepy fucking pizza guy followed me home and now he won't leave." My landlord is pretty much the coolest dude ever, so he snaps awake and heads up to the front door. He uses his adult voice and tells Bill that he did not order pizza and that if he doesn't leave, he's going to call the fucking cops. Bill doesn't say anything, but we see him walk back to his car. He actually did have a pizza box, but probably one meant for another order. My landlord was tired, so it gave me a "come get me immediately when crazy shit like this happens," and then went to bed. I watched Bill in his car from the big window, keeping my screen on and lit as bright as I could so that he could see that I had my phone ready to dial. He started up his shitbox and rolled down the road. I called Pete at the pizza place to tell him that my landlord handled it and that he didn't have to come over anymore. Pete waited for Bill to come back and then basically threatened the life of his Big Bill namesake if he ever came back to the pizza place or near me again. It's been almost 2 years since then, and I've never heard from or about Bill since. So this happened about a week ago around the same time, 2 a.m. Just a bit of background. I live in the UK and go to uni. I live in a fairly typical student house, though in a bad area. Anyway, it's the Easter holidays here and we get 2 weeks off. There's 7 of us in the house usually, but everyone's gone home for the holidays. I don't have a lot of family and I have a ridiculous amount of work to do, so I decided to stay here for Easter. Now, I don't care when I say this, but I hate being alone. Every little fucking noise at night still freaks me out, and I'm 22 fucking years old. Anyway, yesterday I set up camp in the living room, doing some work with headphones in. There's a door from the living room that leads to the backyard, really small yard with another door leading to a small alley. I go out for a smoke down the alley, which is creepy as fuck. I get back, but do you know that feeling of something's wrong here? I felt it. I was thinking I was just being paranoid, so I walked into the kitchen, got a drink. Then I definitely heard a fucking noise. I grab a knife out of the drawer. There's a fucking shadow near the empty space where the old washing machine was. I fucking nearly pissed myself. I don't know what to do. Don't know why I did, but I threw some kitchen towel at him. He fucking screamed, banged his head on the wood. I was standing there with a knife and this guy looked at me dead in the eyes. He had some crazy contact lenses in, like blood red ones. Just fucking made the situation even more terrifying. I just said, get the fuck out or I'll call the police, as I'm sitting there shaking with my knife in hand. He ran out through the door, into the alleyway and fucked off. I rang the police and told them about what had happened. Completely forgot about the washing machine space. Showed the police where he came in. There was a fucking bag with 3 knives, lighter fluid, and matches. Honestly, I have no idea what he intended to do, but I'm glad he didn't get the chance. I hadn't thought about this for a while until just now when an animal charity put an alert out on Facebook. So April last year, I thought about getting 2 rabbits to accompany my other 2. The 2 I had already were neutered females, so I was looking for neutered males, the rabbit's social hierarchy, lifelong buddies, etc. I was looking on Gumtree for an exercise pen to attach to the one we had already so that, if we did get more bunnies, once bounded there'd be a bigger space for them when they weren't out during the day. So I found an advert for one, clicked it, and saw the owner was also putting her rabbits up for adoption. It had been one of those dumb things. Her kid daughter had been excited for Easter, Mom bought her some rabbits. Rabbits didn't want to be picked up. Kid made them nervous, eventually becomes bored of them because they're not like toy rabbits. It's an unfortunate common story. Anyway, I call them up, ask about the exercise pen and the rabbits, and we arranged to meet the next day when the seller's able to arrange to take the morning off work. The next day she met me off the train in her town. More like a village really, it was relatively small, and we walked to her house. She was a really nice lady, and she had a Belfast accent. This is all happening just outside of Glasgow, by the way, and as an English immigrant to Scotland, it was just nice to hear a different accent. On the way, she started telling me about after I had called her. Her phone had said she had 15 missed calls. About a minute after we'd arranged to meet, her phone rang again, and a man with a thick Irish traveler accent had started talking about getting the rabbits from her without even saying hello. When he'd taken a minute to breathe, she explained that she already had someone coming to see them, and that if it didn't work out, she'd let them know. He sounded angry when she'd said that, and sworn before he hung up on her. Anyway, we get to her house. The exercise pen is exactly what I want, and then I meet the bunnies and fall in love with them. She asked me if I'd like to give them a new home, and I agree. Not just because of how lovely and sociable they were with me within a few minutes of meeting them, but because they were a bounded pair, and I couldn't stand the thought of them being separated at a shelter. I mean, it was just after Easter, and then in Christmas are the worst time for spaces and shelters. Because I was also taking the rabbits back with me, she was kind enough to drive me back to my flat with everything. Later on that day, around 6 p.m., I get a call from her. When she had dropped off me and the rabbits back at my flat, she had gone straight to work. When she had gotten home, she found her daughter being comforted by the babysitter. She thought she was probably just upset that the rabbits had gone. But no. Her daughter had answered a knock at the door while the babysitter was making dinner. A big guy in scruffy clothes had looked down at her and grinned and asked if she had any rabbits. She said she did have, but they moved house today and the guy's smile turned angry. He started shouting and he pounded his fist at the door, and that's when the babysitter came running. The babysitter said there was a white transit van parked outside and there were 2 other guys in there. The man's accent was Irish and distinctively traveler. Turns out that when she posted the ad for the exercise pen, it had been from her phone, and Gumtree automatically added her street location on the little map thing next to the username. She had posted a separate ad for the rabbits in the pets for sale section, which I hadn't seen, and that's how they'd found the house. It's a small street in a suburb, so even with the map location, it wasn't a very long street, and they could have easily knocked on the other 5 or 6 doors on the street. The babysitter had called the police after she forced the door shut. These guys are apparently always being spotted in small news agents calling people about dogs for sale. They've been arrested before for organizing dog fights and stealing dogs and rabbits for people's gardens. It was only when I saw a charity on Facebook send out an alert about some Irish chaps in a corner shop holding the classifieds open and ringing about a dog near Perth that I remembered. I guess they move around a lot. Perth's quite far from Glasgow. To think there are such greedy, heartless people driving around, stealing and buying dogs to fight, and taking rabbits to give the dogs a taste for blood for the fight, to the point of shouting at a kid because they have no bait for their dogs on one of the most peaceful holidays of the year. That is creepy as hell. This was about 8 or 10 years ago, but it's the only post-worthy thing I can think of that ever happened to me. Growing up, my family wasn't exactly middle class. We lived in a shitty trailer. The area we lived in looked alright. The yards were mowed and everything was taken care of. But anyways, it was about a week or two before Easter, and I fell asleep watching television. I woke up a couple of hours later, probably around 1 or 2 a.m., and the front door was open. I figured my stepdad had stepped outside for a smoke and just forgot to close the door when he came back in. So I went ahead and closed it and went back to the couch and went back to bed without thinking anything about it. Looking back now, I feel like an idiot for not locking the door. I was awoken again about an hour later to a lot of yelling, and it was my stepdad going off. In the entire time I've known him, I've never heard him yell or anything till this night, and I haven't since. But someone had just walked into our house off the street and had been staring at me while I was sleeping, according to what my stepdad told me. From what I saw, he was fairly skinny and had long hair. He chased the guy out, and to this day, we still have no idea who it was. All I know is about 5 months after this incident, one of our neighbors got busted for having a meth lab in their basement. But still, ever since this happened, I don't go to sleep without locking my door or setting the alarm I have installed in the house I am currently in. This past Easter, my dad, a pilot for a cargo shipping company, was in town and offered to take me across the inlet for a nice dinner. As his co-pilots were away from their families, they were also invited to join, and gladly did. While I waited for them to validate their tickets in the ferry terminal, I spotted an unlikely duo standing by the door. 2 guys, late 20s at most, one large and oafish, the other shorter and movie star gorgeous. I looked just in time to see Oaf nod in my direction, and movie star make a face that can only be described as, meh, I'd fuck her after a few beers. They stood close to us in the terminal. Keep in mind, this ferry carries hundreds of people at a time, and I told my dad about the nod. He laughed and continued talking to his co-pilots next to us. Every time I looked over, movie star was already looking at me. I shook my head. We sat on opposite ends of the ferry. Oaf and movie star debarked before us. I was glad they were gone. We walked up the street from the terminal to the restaurant, and when I turned back to take in the view of the city across the water, was surprised to find the duo had somehow ended up behind us and were slowly walking up the street. I didn't think much on it. It was a busy area and lots of pubs were around. I did think about it more when they walked by the restaurant, peering intently into the front window where we were standing waiting for a table. They smiled, exchanged words with each other, and kept moving. I let out a sigh of relief until they walked back by from the opposite direction. They stopped. They leaned on a bike rack in front of the restaurant a few more times and left. Movie star stared over his shoulder the whole time. Over dinner, I informed my father and his co-pilots of the events that transpired without them even realizing. They laughed about it and eventually had me laughing about it too. We'd never seen the pair of guys again. 3 hours later, as we waited for the return ferry, I was talking to our company. recounting a story from earlier at dinner when I spotted Oaf and Movie Star over my dad's shoulder. Movie Star was looking my way, scratch that, staring. I quickly informed the guys. They were shocked and kept looking back at the pair. There was a miniature showdown in the ferry terminal as each party stared each other down from opposite ends. As the ferry returned, the men were apprehended by security and taken away in handcuffs by local authorities. When we asked around, apparently the men were spotted pickpocketing multiple people throughout the night. Thank God I kept my eyes on them, because I knew for a fact they had their thieving eyes on us. We were relatively new to the neighborhood at this time, having only lived there for a few months. We were getting to know people on the street, but we weren't super close with any particular family. I was 12 or so at the time, and my brother was 4. Now this happened on early Easter Sunday morning. This is important. My room had a huge window right next to my bed, so my dog loved sleeping with me. He was a very docile dog, rarely ever barking or making a fuss. I woke up that morning very early in the morning to him growling. I looked out the window and didn't see anything, so I assumed all was well and tried to go back to sleep. My dog, however, kept growling louder until he was finally barking like a maniac. That's when I realized there were 2 men in my driveway, climbing up the front stairs to our doorway wearing all black. My father came barreling into my room and screamed at these guys through my window to get the fuck off his property, and asking them who the fuck they thought they were creeping around our house so early in the morning. One of them responded and my dad couldn't really hear them. He yelled at them again, and finally he understood what he was saying.
"It's Sam and Joe! We're being the Easter Bunny!"
Sam and Joe were a father and son from down the street who liked to put flower bunny prints on people's driveways and front walks, leading up to a basket of candy at the doorway for any children in the home. They didn't inform us that they were going to be skulking around our house early in the morning, which thus led to my dog flipping out. They did it every year I lived there, although I think they stopped once my brother turned 13. They are a really great family, and my dog never barked again. Just, holy hell, a little forewarning would have been nice. I'm a 26-year-old girl that lives alone in a basement apartment with my dog. Last Easter, my dog was only about 3 months old at the time. I took her out to do her thing before going to bed. This was around 1:30 a.m. We went to the yard. Pitch black. Streetlights are kind of far away, so the only light out was from people's windows. She's doing her thing, and I'm talking to her. I look up and look into my neighbor's yard. No fence. Just 2 medium-sized trees are between our yards. And I see this tall man. I'm guessing around 2 meters tall. The guy is around 3 to 4 meters away from me and just stands there and stares. All of a sudden, he starts walking from the yard towards the street. I do the same. My front door was open. Didn't want to risk anything. When I come to my door, I see the guy. He stands in front of my neighbor's house, and he just stares back. I stood there for about 2 minutes, just trying to see what the fuck he was doing. Then he starts walking up the stairs of the house, and it looks like he's going in. At that point, I decide that I just have a creepy neighbor and go into my apartment. I sit down on the couch and continue watching television. Then I start seeing someone blocking a beam of light that comes in through my curtains. And again, it gets blocked. It was like someone was walking in my yard. I mute the TV, but hear nothing. The weather was very cold, so the grass was crispy. I stand up and lift my curtains up. Note that I live in a basement. And there he is. Our faces couldn't have been more than a foot away from each other, on opposite sides of the window. I managed to keep my cool and stared back. The guy just stood up and walked slowly away in the crispy grass and went back into my neighbor's yard. I eventually freaked out and called the cops. And now, maybe 1 month ago, I'm watching TV with the dog. All of a sudden, she starts growling. Hairs on the back go up and teeth showing. There he was again. Same window. I called the police again, but there's very little they could do besides talking to him. Now, I always have the curtains down. I have a security system and always take a flashlight with me to the yard if it's dark. I had just gotten out of a really shitty relationship with a guy I had been living with for 3 years. He was a really pretty boy who looked like Johnny Depp, but he liked to steal all my money while I was at work and throw crazy parties. I got tired of his stealing and coming home to emo kids asleep all over my house, so I left him. I didn't want anything but my stuff, and I let him keep the house and cars I bought him. I just wanted my sanity back. I moved back in with my granny. I'm her favorite grandchild, and she's spoiled me as she does. I had recently reconnected with my best friend that I had known since kindergarten, Chris. I was hanging out with Chris on my back porch one morning when the subject of boys gets brought up. Chris is gay, and we often talk about boys together. He asked if I was seeing anybody, and I tell him that I'm not. It had only been a few months since I left the money leech, and I didn't think I was ready to trust anyone. Chris said that he knew the perfect man for me. I said that I don't think there is such a thing. He begs me to go meet this guy. I reluctantly sigh and tell my granny that I'm going on an adventure with Chris. We talked as we drove, and he tells me that this guy has been in love with me since we were kids. He told me it was this little boy, Quinn, that used to follow me around. I told him that I thought Quinn was a lot younger than us. He told me that Quinn is just short like me. He called Quinn and told me to talk to him. I do, and he seems really sweet, but a little airheaded. We show up at his house, and he's really pretty. He was also very sweet, has a good job, his own car, and owns his own company. We start hanging out a lot and eventually started dating. He buys me presents like nice jewelry and Prada sunglasses. He told me his girl only deserved the best. I told him I couldn't accept all these gifts, but he would just dump them in my car or purse when I wasn't looking, so I just learned to take them. He wanted to always call me and talk for hours, and wanted me to call when I got home from his house. I thought he was sweet and just wanted to be sure I got home safely. The reality set in rather quickly. He introduced me to his entire family within a couple of days of us dating. I usually don't introduce guys to my family until we're serious, but whatever. Upon meeting his mother, I learned that it's her house and he lives there with her. I also learned that he has no job other than doing odd jobs for his dad. I was speechless. He also lied about being my age. I was 24 at the time, and he had just turned 18 like the day or so before we started dating. I was so upset I didn't know how to feel. He begs me not to leave him and to take him to my play rehearsal the next day. He showed up in my driveway just as I was leaving for the theater. Chris drove him there and tells me we need to sort our shit out. He said if Quinn was gay, he would be all over him, not to leave him over a few small lies. The whole drive is awkward. I don't want to talk to this guy. I want him gone, I'm thinking in my mind. He pulls out a diamond ring and tries to propose to me. I tell him no, but he slides the rock on my finger anyway. He tells me I need to just think about it. I go to the theater and shit just goes downhill from there. He embarrassed me in front of my friends with his ignorance and childness and threw a bitch fit because my other best friend, Mikey, gave me a piggyback ride. He storms out, and then his mother started calling to check up on him. I decided right then and there it was done. After rehearsal, I got a friend to go with me to drive him home. I tried to give his ring back, but he wouldn't take it. I leave and go to a bar with my fellow actors. I told him that was why I had to take him home so early. Driving back, I see flashing lights in my rearview mirror and hear yelling. Chris and Quinn are following me. I pull into the bar and Chris throws Quinn and myself at each other and yells that we need to talk. I break up with Quinn right then and there. As he starts throwing a bitch fit, I walk into the bar with my friend. I spend the night at Mikey's for a few days. When I return home, I have tons of harassing phone calls. He called me and my grandparents every few hours. He even had Chris help. Everywhere I went, he was there. He stalked me at home, made me run from a theater during a movie, and followed my car. Chris helped him do all of this as well. He even pulled a gun on my family while we were outside during Easter. I was helping the little kids hunt eggs. He cruised by several times and then pulled his gun. He creeped by with his gun and pointed it directly at us. I was terrified and I had no idea what to think. I filed a restraining order that day. I moved in with Mikey so he would leave my grandparents alone. I went nowhere without at least 2 guys with me at all times. I thought at any minute he would come and kill me. I felt hunted like a deer in the woods. But I was lucky though. I come to find out, he shot up the car of his next girlfriend while her 2-year-old was inside. Damn, was I lucky. This encounter happened when I was about 13 years old. My parents would take me and my older brother to the indoor pool once a week after dinner to get some exercise they were in dire need of. They'd always leave for another pool while me and my brother would hang out in the kiddie pool because it's warmer than the others, and we generally just talked about this and that. The pool was pretty empty around the evenings anyway, but sometimes there'd be actual children, often with their parents, playing in the water. One of those nights, me and my brother dived around with our swimming goggles on, and I saw something I wish I hadn't. An adult male was in the deeper end of the kiddie pool, and he was showing off his junk under the surface of the water. I raised my head out of the water and nervously checked him out. He was at least 40 years old, with ginger hair and a bit of a beard, and stick thin. His face was weird. It was as if he was smiling blissfully, but almost smug. I was a naive child, so I thought he must have been some father who really had to pee and didn't want to soil his underwear, but something felt off. I felt alarmed and doubted what I saw was real, so I dived down again to verify. And indeed, he was pulling down his Speedos underwater. Some children below the age of 10 were blissfully ignorant of this, and he didn't approach anyone either, so I tried to forget what I had seen, made some excuse to my brother, and we went to the Olympic pool. Before leaving, I was washing off the pool water in the shower room with my mother and trying to make light-hearted conversation. I told her about the weird man peeing in the kiddie pool. She didn't laugh, and instead took me by the hand to the staff from the pool. I slowly realized that I had in fact seen an exhibitionist pedophile and retold the story to the staff. Apparently, the staff had heard stories of a man like that hanging around the pools sometimes before, so they immediately sent staff members to all the pools to look for a man fitting my description, but apparently he had already left at this point. My mom made me promise to tell her immediately if I ever saw someone like that again, and we drove home. We never saw that man again after that, and stopped our regular visits to the pool soon after, since it was a pretty far drive every time. I never really thought about that man again until 2 years later on my way home from school. I live at the very last stop and the tram is usually empty by then, but this time it wasn't empty by the time we approached the second to last stop. I turned around, and there he was, a ginger man in his 40s. Honestly, I had no idea what to do, and he didn't seem to notice my presence whatsoever. I briefly wondered if I should tell the tram driver, but what was I going to say? Help, I saw this guy's junk in a pool 2 years ago, call the police. I didn't do anything. I was just relieved as he got off the tram one stop before mine. I never saw him again after this, but the fact that he is probably still out there and might live close to me scares me. It also occurred to me that his creepy expression might be an indicator of a mental disability, as there is a communal apartment for people with such disabilities right at the tram stop he got off at. I'm glad I never found out. When I was 16 or 17, I worked as a lifeguard at a private pool in my neighborhood. You had to be a member, and each member was assigned a member ID. You could buy a friend a guest pass. During the summers on Friday night, we had what was called Friday Night Cheers, where we would have a band play, the adults would sit around the bar and drink, and all the kids would come and swim till about 10 p.m. One night I was working Cheers, and I was at the diving well, and there was a guy and his friend trying to splash me while going off the diving board. I didn't think anything of it because every kid tries to splash the lifeguard. As it was getting close to closing, I started to go around and clean up all the tables. The diving board guy started to follow me around and make small talk. I'm a very friendly person, so I started having a conversation with him. He tells me his name and that he is 19 and home from college. He then asks me for my number. I tell him no, I don't give out my number to strangers, and that I have a boyfriend. Not sure if I did at the time or not. He won't stop asking, saying he just wants to be friends, so I leave and go sit in the guard shack. A couple days later, I'm working, and he's there again. We aren't supposed to talk to people while on duty, but he won't go away, so I start to ignore him. He stops talking, but just kind of hangs out in the water right by me. A guy I work with comes to take my spot so I can go relieve another guard at another station. The guy follows, but I ignore him. This continues every day. One day I get a text from a number that I don't know. I ask who it is, and it's the guy from the pool. The only way I can think that he got my number is from our schedule that hangs in the guard shack right by the door, which is always open. I tell him he needs to stop texting me and following me around. The texts stop, but he continues to come to the pool every day and follow me. I finally tell my manager, and she says the next time he comes in that they'll make sure he really is a member. Sometimes people will give their friends their member number if they know a picture isn't attached to it on the computer. So he comes in and they ask for an ID. It doesn't match the information on the computer, and he says he's about 27 years old. I don't know why, but they let him in anyway. He comes over to me, and as soon as he gets 5 feet away, my manager comes over and tells me to go take my break. I come back 15 minutes later, and now the cops were there. Apparently he had tried to argue and forcefully push security away when they asked him to leave. I watched him taken away in handcuffs, and I'm thankful that I never have to see him again. Growing up in a small Christian community, I was very sheltered compared to other children my age, and there were a lot of red flags I didn't understand. I never really thought there were certain individuals that you just don't approach, so naturally at a young age I was very trusting of almost anyone. I'm from the Midwest, and our summers are very humid, often having highs of 100+ degrees. My dad worked less during the summer months, and so he took us to the local pool because it was cheap and he could take naps and tan. Now, this pool is not a pool for all age groups. It's intended for children mainly, and if adults are in the pool, it is typically only to keep a closer eye on their kids. My elder siblings liked the water slides, but because I was too afraid of them, I was often left to my own devices. I couldn't swim, and still to this day I've never learned. So what I spent most of my time doing was walking around with my head underwater or snorkeling. While snorkeling, I often found left-behind toys and would put them in the lost and found box. Most of the time, as far as I can tell, I was the only person doing so. One day, while I'm at my usual routine, I see a cylinder-shaped object that was very bright pink floating around. I'd looked closer and saw a man sitting cross-legged at the bottom of the pool, smiling with his hand near the object. I've never seen a penis before. Well, an adult penis. I had a brother around my same age. Siblings, you know how it goes. And I had no idea as a child that this man was masturbating at the bottom of the pool. He noticed me and smiled, and I got closer to try to pick up the toy near him, but I was not able to take it with me, and upon closer inspection, I realized it was his penis. I immediately felt extremely embarrassed and noped the fuck out of there, but as I was pulling away, he grabbed my hand and tried to keep it to his junk. This scared the shit out of me, and that's the first sign of danger I felt from him. I was able to get away, but for the rest of the time in the pool, I laid next to my napping father. I was around 9 years old, and I didn't realize this man was a pedophile. A few minutes later, I noticed him resurface, and he stared at me for prolonged periods of time. His eyes were similar to an animal's. It made me feel really scared and grossed out, and I woke up my father crying, saying I didn't feel well. I often got chlorine sickness, and asked if we could go home. He told me to grab my elder siblings, and after that we packed up and left. I never saw that man again after this event, and I really hope he never returned to that pool, but I find that very doubtful. As I got older and learned more about these sorts of things, it made me feel sick to my stomach. I'm 20 now, but I can remember that man so well. I've only told my mom about this, but not to the full extent of what happened. So parents or people that watch kids, please be extra careful with your kids and keep a close eye on them at the pool. If you sense they are being bothered by something, ask them. Otherwise, they might just keep quiet about a potential predator. Also, does anyone know how he managed to sit cross-legged at the bottom of the pool without floating up? That shit creeps me out. This happened about a year ago. I'm a male, big guy, ex-football player. I'm in my late 20s. I live in a nice neighborhood in Arizona. Needless to say, I don't have much to fear at night. I had 2 roommates living with me at the time, so there always seemed to be someone with me at night. I got home late from a business trip around midnight, came into the house, exhausted, and dropped everything and went to bed. I am a heavy sleeper, so it takes something loud to wake me. Around 3 a.m., I hear a loud, ghetto knocking on my door. It sounded like someone was kicking my door down. I had never heard anything like it before. Though it was a Saturday, I figured my roommates had gone out to the bars and forgot their keys. Begrudgingly, I stumbled out of bed, walking down the hallway in the dark, and noticed all the bedroom doors are open and no roommates to be found. It must be them. They're messing with me. I arrive at my front door and look through the peephole and see a young woman, homeless looking but actually kind of cute. She had a really baggy sweatshirt on with jeans and a beanie. Might I remind you, this is Arizona in the dead of summer. It had to be 95 degrees at this time. This was odd. She was frantic, almost like she was being chased, so I was just going to open the door and make sure that she was okay, but then she started laughing, like a scary laugh, which this stopped me in my tracks. Then she proceeded to yell,
I need to pee, let me in.
Over and over for a good 5 minutes. I just stood there behind the door in silence, watching through the peephole. I wasn't scared at this moment. I was just annoyed and about to yell at her to get out of here. Then all of a sudden, she just turns and hopscotched down my driveway like a child. Just thought to myself, this girl is whacked out on drugs or something. I go back to bed. 30 minutes later, I'm just about to fall back to sleep, and that same ghetto knock happens again. I'm furious at this point, about to run out there and open the door and give this woman a piece of my mind. But I look through the peephole first, and it's a male. He is dressed in practically the same outfit as the woman. He is a scrawny-looking male, not a physical presence by any means, but he looks just as whacked out as her. I can see her behind the guy, jumping up and down laughing. He's looking to the peephole, yelling,
Yo, my girl has to pee, let us in.
Now I'm a little freaked out, not going to lie. I have seen a lot of situations like this in horror movies, so I just back away from the door, go to the kitchen, grab a knife, go back to my room, and sit in my closet. I'm kind of laughing to myself about how ridiculous the situation is. I figured if they're going to break in, at least they wouldn't see me at first in the closet, and I could launch a counterattack. 2 hours pass, no more noises, and I fall asleep in my closet with a knife in hand. Then I hear tapping on my bedroom window. It startles me awake. My bedroom is on the first floor and is accessible from the backyard. The lights are off, so I creep over to the window and push aside slowly one of the blinds. It's the woman, peering into my bedroom, but not looking directly at me, just subtly tapping the window. and off in the distance was the guy, butt-ass naked, doing cannonballs into my pool. I instinctively, without thinking, yell,
"Yo, get out of my pool, you idiot!"
which brings her attention to me. We make eye contact. We are inches away from each other, and eyes wide open, she had the scariest smile and starts giggling. That freaked me the hell out. Instantly, I call the cops and tell them some crazy drugged-up wackos are in my backyard, and I fear for my life. Please send somebody. Went into my bathroom, locked the door, just waiting for the "here's Johnny" moment to happen. Dispatcher informed me cops were there, but no one was outside the house. They must have ran off into the alleyway when the cops showed up. When I was 18, I went to a college, British college, not university, in a fairly large city. I had to get an hour-long bus into the city, and my lesson plan left huge gaps during the day, sometimes 4 hours at a time. I had a lot of time to kill, so I started taking up swimming at a local leisure center. Pool was pretty busy, but everyone kept to themselves. This day I needed to piss, so I headed to the bathroom and used the urinal. While I was pissing, this dude slides up to the urinal next to me. This is already pretty weird, as most guys know you don't use the neighboring urinal to someone if others are free. Some people are a bit clueless though, so I didn't think much of it. He then, however, starts brazenly staring down at my dick. I quickly finish up and leave the bathroom without washing my hands. I carry on my swim unbothered, then get changed. As I leave the swimming pool, I see the guy waiting for me, leaning on the wall outside. He's probably about 5'10", 40 years old, and quite slobby and blokey looking. Doesn't seem the type to go swimming alone to get fit. I'm 6'2", thin, but fairly confident in myself. As I make my way back to college, he starts following me. This goes on for about a mile, so I decide to test him and start crossing busy roads at weird places. Of course, he stays on my trail, having to basically dodge cars to keep up. I decide to forget walking the last mile back and take the busy shuttle bus to the local uni that goes close to the college. Again, of course, he follows and gets on. Luckily, there were not many seats free, and he can't sit next to me. I ride for about 5 minutes, ring the bell, then hop off and get the fuck out of there. I see him get off the bus as well, but I was quick enough to duck down an alley and catch a taxi before the creep could follow suit. I have no idea what his intentions were, but thankfully, he only got a look at my pecker. I was about 10 at the time, and my brother, also 10, were taking swimming lessons at a public pool about 10 minutes away from our house. We would go for our lessons every Friday evening, and usually afterwards we would just chill in the spa pool till our father was ready. On this particular Friday evening, my brother and I were in the spa pool doing kid stuff and whatnot, when I noticed a man sitting directly across the spa from me, just kind of staring. The spa is about 12 meters in length. The man was tall and thin. He had a very pointy nose and button-like eyes. He had very short, thin gray hair, and his skin was unusually red. I didn't think much of this at the time, as I had seen this man around the pool before, and I think my dad may even had a conversation with him at one point. But he continued to stare, and it made me so uncomfortable that I had to get out of the spa and sat outside waiting for my father. I started seeing him everywhere. Wherever I was, he was there. Grocery stores, malls, outside of my school, and always at my Friday night swimming lesson. I never told my dad about seeing him everywhere. I thought maybe I was overreacting, and I was very naive to the obvious danger. I remember one instance when I was at a department store with my mom, and I saw him down the end of every aisle we went down, and said nothing. Red flags started to go off when he decided to carry a camera around with him. He would always be in a completely black outfit with his camera bag around his neck, just watching me. One day I was at the mall with a few friends when one of them pointed him out before I had even noticed. I told them about the man and the way he looked at me, and my friend's oldest sister advised me to tell security so that he would be removed. As soon as he saw them coming, he got up and left. Flash forward about 2 years or so. Haven't seen my stalker friend for so long, now he's becoming a distant memory. Until I get called into the school office because my uncle was here to collect me early. As soon as I saw him there, arms open, in my fucking school office waiting for me, I felt sick. I had forgotten about this man, and 2 years later he has the nerve to come and try to get me out of school, and he has his camera. I marched right past him and to the officewoman and simply said, "This man is not my uncle," and walked back to class. At lunches he was outside my school. He would wave and try to get me to come over, and he would hold up a chocolate bar as some kind of child bait. So his random school appearances continue to the point the school needs to contact my parents and let them know the situation. My dad was distraught, having actually spoken to this man before, and demanded the police be contacted so we could get a restraining order or something. That's when we found out. The man was a convicted sex offender. The police took his camera and found hundreds and hundreds of photos of me, some of which were zoomed up into my bedroom windows at my own home. We got a restraining order, and thankfully, I haven't seen him since. Summer 2009, where I've just turned 13. Like any unpopular teenager, I decided to have my few friends with me to spend my birthday party at the swimming pool, maybe 45 minutes away from the area where I live. It's a pretty nice pool, with a kids area and some rapids, which are usually more of a lazy river type deal. I used to go there all the time, but I haven't been there since, for reasons you'll understand. My friends and I have spent a fun-filled couple of hours in the pool when the time comes to leave and maybe head back to my house to eat cake and ice cream and all that crap that teens eat at birthdays. As you do, we headed into the showers and then into the changing rooms. The changing rooms at this pool are those stalls which aren't floor-to-ceiling walls, with gaps at the bottom and top. They're about 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters, and there's a bench opposite the door. Now, I won't lie. At the age of 13, I was a really slow changer, but in the group of friends who were mostly girls, including myself, there wasn't much difference. So I'm getting changed. I'm standing there in my towel, just about to start putting my underwear on, when I hear something. I probably would have been able to avoid a lot of shit if I just looked up. But then, hey, I was getting changed and I was concentrating. It's when I finally got my underwear on that I look up, and I unfortunately lock eyes with a guy who has his head in between the wall and the ceiling. Like literally, he has jammed his head over the wall to look at me, a young teenage girl, changing. I'm shocked, because what the heck do you do in this situation? He pulls his head back when he realizes I've seen him, and I feel sick. I have chills up and down my neck as I try and get dressed as fast as I can. My skin crawled. It was absolutely awful. Story does not end there. Fast forward through a few minutes of the fastest changing of my life, and now I'm fully clothed with one trainer on and the other in my hand. I have no idea what I'm doing now, but I'm pretty sure he's going to come back, so I put myself on the bench, crouched in a stance I'm sure any action hero would be proud of. Lo and behold, back comes his face, jammed back into this tiny gap. It must have hurt, but apparently sacrifices have to be made in the pursuit of being a pervert. This time, though, I'm damn ready. I don't know whether anyone's ever had a hard shoe sole forcibly jammed into their eye and nose twice in a row, but it looked painful. I hope it was bloody painful at least. That was basically it from him. I put on my shoes, I walked calmly out to my friends, and then we met my parents at the doors. I didn't tell any of them, not even when I passed him out in the reception area. He didn't see me, but I saw him. And let me tell you, my greatest regret nowadays was that I didn't tell my dad right then and watch him slug that asshole right in his dumbass pervert face. I'm a female and about 7 years old at the time. We were on a family holiday in Florida at the time. My mother had inadvertently booked us a pretty substandard hotel. I say hotel, but even that was stretching it. It was shit. and my father, my brother, and I decided to go for a swim in the pool as it was quite humid that day. The pool was naturally packed, mostly with kids, but there was also this one guy standing in the middle. I suppose this must have really stayed with me because I remember his face vividly. I'm 24 now. He was about 6'2", mid to late 30s, crew cut, mustache, well built, and had the creepiest bland smile on his face. He was also staring straight ahead at this little blonde girl playing with a beach ball. He clearly was not her father and didn't seem to be with any of the other kids as far as I could tell. He was just standing there, alone, in the middle of the pool surrounded by a bunch of prepubescent kids. In spite of this, I was unconcerned. I was there with my older brother and father, and I felt perfectly safe. So me, being the badass mofo that I was, threw myself cannonball style into the pool, surfaced, adjusted my goggles, yes I had goggles because I was cool like that, and went exploring underwater. There wasn't anything particularly interesting to report, except there was something protruding from the weird guy's trunks, out front. I swam around underwater, giving him a wide berth of course, and find his penis is outside of his shorts. I realized now he had an erection, but obviously at the time I hadn't a clue what that was. I resurface again and study his face, because maybe he doesn't know that it fell out. I was still about 10 feet away from him at this point, so I thought I was being discreet, and I didn't want to embarrass him because surely it was an accident that it fell out. He realized I'd seen it. He tore his eyes away from the little girl. As his eyes locked on mine, I felt as if though they were boring into me. They seemed to darken in an instant, and I have honestly never felt so frightened in my life. I think I've even let out an audible whimper. We stood there staring at each other for about 10 seconds, me frozen on the spot, when he turned back to the little girl once again, bland smile back in place. I booked it out of the pool, run over to my father and exclaimed, "Daddy, the man's penis is outside of his shorts." My father's face darkens, and he tells me to go back to the room with my brother. I don't actually know what happened after that. My dad never told me. He just said the guy went away. Either way, I'm glad I didn't have to deal with pedo pool guy ever again. I'm in my late 20s and 36 weeks pregnant right now. I've always been pretty fit and had made a big effort to stay in shape while pregnant, so I've been swimming a few times a week at a local pool. I like to go when it's slow and not very many people are around, but after this experience, I'm rethinking that. I was just finishing up my laps late morning on a Wednesday when this place is practically deserted, and head to the hot tub where I'll sit for just a few minutes to stretch. That's when I see her, or rather, smell her first. A thick, pungent odor permeates the alcove where the therapy pool is tucked away out of plain view. It smells of cigarettes and unwashed hair. It's a smell that only fairly deranged people take on due to the total lack of bodily awareness. She may not be that old, but she is very aged. She is slouched over with a curved spine and very long, stringy hair, yellowy gray. She smiles at me with a mouth full of rotten yellow teeth. I smile back, trying to be friendly. She seems mentally ill, and I don't want to be mean. However, she gets into the tub and sits uncomfortably close to me, still watching my face closely. I get up to leave as I'm pretty much done anyway, and being pregnant, I limit my time in the hot water. She notices my belly right away. "You're pregnant." I nod and smile a little, still walking away. She continues, "Where's your husband?" "Around." I lie over my shoulder as I walk off. I'm slightly weirded out, but not too bad. I get back into the pool to float for a while and relax. Then it's time to go, and I head to the showers. Right away I see her. She is soaping herself up liberally and muttering to herself. I am getting a strong vibe not to go near this woman. Normally odd behavior doesn't really faze me. I'm not easily intimidated by women, but I instinctively held back to wait for her to be done showering. It became clear she was not going to finish up anytime soon, so I choose a shower furthest away and start washing my hair. I keep her in my periphery, but I don't engage. She sees me again and announces,
"You're pregnant! Look at your belly!"
and continues to try and make conversation. I pretend not to hear her and turn away a little to avoid eye contact and just start soaping up. I take off my bikini to wash all the chlorine smell off me. I'm just washing my body as usual until I hear breathing behind my shoulder, very, very close. I turn. She's inches away from me, breathing hard. Hands working quickly, I can see her shriveled breasts sagging and what seems to be thousands of layers of folded, wrinkly skin all over her. She is muttering and panting.
"So beautiful, so beautiful."
I realize she has her hands on her vagina, rubbing like mad. I'm so surprised I just stand there for a frozen second, then quickly grab my towel and get the fuck out. She doesn't follow me to my relief. Heading back to the changing area, there is the same insanely strong odor, not just of cigarettes, but of stale booze. I see her things, a pile of plastic bags and some wipes strewn about that are bloodied. I get dressed in a bathroom stall that locks, and thankfully I make it to my car without seeing or smelling her again. My family traveled from the Midwest to the East Coast almost every year. We usually drove through Canada to New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and then up to Maine, where my dad's family is from. We stopped at various tourist spots and resorts while on the trip. When I was somewhere around 6 or 7 years old, we were staying at a family-style resort in New Hampshire. It was a very large complex with 4 buildings full of hotel rooms, all facing each other with a parking lot to the left, a small park picnicking area in the middle, and the outdoor pool with a fence around it to the right. Each building had 2 levels with outdoor stairs, and each room had a door that went outside, not into a hallway. There was a path from the bottom of the stairs through the small park to the pool. I have always been quick to get ready, so while my mom, dad, and sister, 1 year old, were getting ready to go to the pool, I was getting antsy and wanted to go check out the tacky water slide tacked onto the side of the pool. I remember my dad being busy and distracted while I said,
"I'm going out to the pool,"
and began walking outside and down the stairs. You could see the park and the pool from our balcony, but my dad wanted me to wait. I didn't and proceeded to walk by myself out to the pool. I was walking along the path through the little park when 2 big arms picked me up and started pulling me back. This is what I have the sharpest memory of, my purple jelly sandals being lifted off the ground under me. I didn't immediately turn around because I just figured it was my dad dragging me back to the room, mad that I had disobeyed him. I just sighed and accepted my fate as being in trouble. Then, I heard my dad in the distance yell,
"Hey, get off my daughter!"
And so I finally turned to see who the hell was holding me. It was some guy, really tall, really thin, wearing dark colors. He had a car that was pulled up right to the park, not parked in a parking spot or anything, only about 20 feet away. I looked and saw my dad barreling down the motel stairs holding my sister's water noodle and wearing his bright green neon water shorts. This was probably 96. The dude saw my dad, dropped me, and then dove into the car, which promptly took off. I cried because I had scraped my leg in the fall. My dad chased the car for a short while, but they quickly picked up speed and were gone. I have no idea if the license plate was recorded or the cops were called. We did continue to go to the pool and play, but I remember that my dad was in a rightfully bad mood the rest of the afternoon, and I couldn't get him to play in the pool with me. He usually was a big reader, but he just sat in a chair peering around the parking lot and looking miffed the rest of the afternoon. Who knows what would have happened if my dad hadn't been walking out behind me looking out the window. I was honestly probably 10 seconds away from being thrown in that car and taken God knows where. I was around 6 months pregnant and working at a retail store in a large mall. Our store was a corporate store, so there was some really heavy traffic through it. During some downtime, I told my coworkers I was taking a bathroom break. Unfortunately, the restrooms were on the second floor of our store towards the back in the furniture section, which was hardly ever busy. I worked in the women's section in the bottom floor right near the door that entered the mall itself. I rushed into the restroom because, holy crap, this baby is crushing my bladder. Instantly, I felt like something was wrong. Nobody was in the restroom as far as I could see. No feet in the stalls, no one coming in or out. There was no other restrooms nearby, so I brushed it off and did my business. And the entire time I was standing at the mirrors near the sinks, I felt as if someone was watching me. Now at this point I had been working at this store for over a year. Never before had I felt so off. I left and went back downstairs to the section I worked in. When I arrived, less than 5 minutes later, I heard over the walkie-talkie that there was an incident in the women's restroom. I felt uncomfortable, but went back to work as usual. Later, my coworker told me what happened. My manager, a tiny, sweet Pakistani woman, went into the women's restroom. She was alone, and as she went to wash her hands, a man rushed out from another bathroom stall straight towards her. Thankfully, she had her walkie-talkie on her and immediately called for help. The guy panicked, ran out of the women's restroom, through the store, and out into the mall. As far as I'm aware, he was never caught. It sent chills down my spine that while I was in the restroom, this guy was hiding in there. I'm guessing that he saw I was pregnant and decided not to attempt to assault me. I'm so thankful that he didn't harm my manager or anyone else. This summer I've had the joy of working as a plant vendor at a fairly popular home improvement store. I just completed my first year of college and I'm a female. The store I represent is a kind of sketchy town area of my city, so I have met my fair share of creepers and pervs. As a plant vendor, my responsibilities are to take care of deliveries, removing plants from racks and putting them on tables in a presentable manner, move shrubs, price items according to advertisements, and help customers from time to time. My uniform consists of shorts, a t-shirt, sneakers, and on occasion a hat. Usually you wear whatever is weather appropriate. On a typical day, a guy probably in his late 40s to early 50s comes in with his elderly mom. This guy looked a little ragged, but was nice when he came up and asked me for help, so I obliged. Before I waited on him, I had been taking care of a delivery and had been bending down to get a tray of plants out to put on the table. He asked me a question, so I showed him where to find what he was looking for. After we were out of earshot of his mother, he proceeds to tell me what a nice ass I have for a little white girl. I decided to be polite, ignore his comment, and go back to my delivery. He checks out and pulls his car up to the front of the garden department where I was working because the associates were loading his car with mulch. He then gets out of his car and walks over to me. I pretty much give him a "what the fuck do you want now" look, and he says, "My ex-wife was always hounding on me about my wandering eyes, but I just can't help myself." Luckily, someone got paged on the intercom who has the same name or similar sounding name as me, so I just fled to the indoors. On another instance, I was hit on by an associate. This dude was 43 and still hitting the clubs up in our city like he was 21. Every time we worked together, he would insist that I was no fun and that I should go out to the clubs with him so he could show me a good time. That creeper got fired because of my complaint and complaints from other female associates as well. Needless to say, next summer, I would like to get an internship and not work retail. When I was a freshman in college, I was 18 and I got a job at one of the big chain department stores in my town. Not my first job, also not my first choice for a job in general, but the hours were steady and it paid more than the minimum wage. I am now almost 22 and I have a new job that has recently brought back my memories from freshman year, and I'm sharing this story because I'm tired of feeling like I'm fucked up because this shit keeps happening to me. So enjoy. This particular department store is open from 8 a.m. until midnight starting on Black Friday and keeps those hours until Christmas Eve. Being a student, During the week, I usually worked the later shifts, from 8 p.m. to midnight, and on weekends my hours varied. This particular incident happened when I worked from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on a Sunday. I worked in the women's clothing department my entire shift. I was wearing leggings, an oversized cardigan, and of course a name tag because fuck retail workers, right? Anyways, at some point during my shift, I dropped my phone and my case broke. The store at which I worked at happens to be next door to a Walmart, so I decided that after I clocked out, I'd head over there to get a new case. I walked out to my car, which is parked at the back of the lot, and head over to Walmart. When I get there and get parked, I realize how bad my feet hurt, and I decide to sit in my car for a minute before heading into the store. I check Facebook, Twitter, whatever, and I'm clearly paying no mind to my surroundings because when I ran out of shit to read, I decided to head inside. I sat in my car for maybe 10 minutes, 15 tops. I exit my car, and I realized that my wallet had somehow ended up on the passenger side floor, so I reached in to grab it. As I'm half in my car and half out of my car, I hear someone saying my name. I pick up my wallet and duck back out of my car, only to find a man perched on my trunk, presumably waiting for me. He legit looked like Dave Chappelle, with less teeth. I've obviously never seen this person in my entire life, so I close my door and lock my car and start trying to get to the store. I get to the front of my car like where you would stand if you were going to pop the hood when he starts to yell at me.
Hey, Masha, I saw you at work today. Damn, I'm gonna start shopping there more often. You are a fine piece of ass. If I hit it, can I get a discount?
Fuck that. I start running, and so does he.
Masha, how are you gonna ignore me like that? I'm just trying to give you a ride.
I get into Walmart and ask for a manager. I'm not sure if he came inside. I didn't look back. The Walmart people call the cops and a manager walked me back to my car. The cops met me at my dorm and took my statement, but the cops in my town are actually fucking useless, so I don't even think they believed me. Whatever. I called my manager once the police left and told him what happened, and he tells me he's going to go through the tapes to see if anyone was following me during my shift, seeing as that's obviously how they knew my name and which store I worked at. He calls back the next day and says, yeah, there's a guy on the tapes matching the description I gave, but he didn't buy anything, therefore they didn't have any other information on him. Cool, right? Furthermore, that guy would have to wait for me to get off of work and then follow me to my next destination. What if I had went home, you know? Fuck that. 2 weeks or so go by and the managers have started a buddy system where everyone gets walked out to their car by one of the bigger employees. I happen to work until midnight this time, and my friend Alex is my bodyguard for the evening. I'm about 100 feet in front of him and maybe a quarter of a football field away from my car. I happen to look up at my car and there's the outline of a man standing on my hood. I freeze where I'm at and look back at Alex, who says, I see him. The man on my hood stands up but doesn't leave. He also doesn't say anything. He's just standing there like a fucking creep. So, Alex takes off in a full sprint towards him, and I dial 911. The guy sees the giant ex-football player sprinting towards him and books it away from my car. Alex doesn't chase him. The cops come and take yet another useless statement, except this time there was another witness, but it was still dark so neither of us saw his face. Anyways, I quit that job not long after because I certainly didn't feel safe having at least one stalker, but quite possibly 2 stalkers knowing my name, where I worked, and what car I drive. Next time, I plan on having a knife. So this happened a while back when I was in my early 20s. I was working at a little retail store in my town's mall. It was coming up on the end half of the day and I don't know how I noticed it, but an older man, probably in his 50s, I'm not sure, had walked past my store about 3 to 4 times, not consecutively, just every now and then. Now I worked in one of those little costume jewelry stores, so it was odd for an older male to be walking past so many times, but I kinda didn't think anything of it. I didn't even know how I picked up on it in the first place. It came closing time, and I had left to catch my bus home at about 6:30 p.m. I remember it was transitioning into winter because it was dark out by then. I'm a very paranoid person. I still live by the stranger danger rules. So, even now, when I leave work, I make sure I change into an outfit less fashionable. I don't like drawing attention to myself in any way, so I try to make sure I'm as covered up and average looking as I can be. I don't know why, I have this disease where I attract all the wrong attention for no reason at all. So as I said, I was waiting for my bus home, sitting by myself at the town center's bus terminal, and guess who walks past me? The older man. At this point I kind of felt a little uneasy, but in my head I tried to make reason prevail, as many people take buses all the damn time. My bus showed up, and I got on, and well, you can all guess who got on after me. I remember sitting in the seats facing inward, the ones for wheelchairs and prams, and he sat at the first seat above the steps. I remember staring forward and feeling his eyes burning into me. I kept trying to use my peripheral vision to see if he was looking at me, but not wanting him to know I noticed him. The whole bus ride I waited to see if he got off before my stop, thinking it was just my over-anxious paranoid mind working over me, until I pressed the button for my stop. I waited until the last possible second to press it, and as I stood up, he did too. I went to walk to the front door of the bus, and he exited the rear. At that moment, as soon as he stepped off, I sat back down again. I had no idea where the bus went after my stop, but honestly, I didn't fucking care. I will never forget the look on his face as the bus drove off. I have never seen such hate and anger in someone's face than I did through that window. His face is burnt into my memory like a photograph. It still absolutely terrifies me to this day. I have no idea what would have happened to me if I got off that bus at my stop that night, but I'm glad my paranoia was so intense, I didn't. On a slow day, a male customer came in, probably in his 50s, definitely single, and having a weird accent I couldn't place. He asked for help finding plants that would look nice together in a planter outside his front door. The guy was a regular at the busiest time of the season, coming in at least once a week for special buys. Note, it's normal for a customer to describe their home to you so you can serve their needs appropriately. But it's really odd if they tell you exactly where they live. He begins to tell me about his house and goes as far as to tell me where it is, explicitly. I brush it off and continue showing him what I think could work for him. But again he mentions where he lives and gives me directions on how to get there. At that point I was more than creeped out, but there weren't any associates around to pass him off on. So I begrudgingly continued to help him against my better judgment. As we went about the outside garden department, he kept saying, "How lucky I am to have you all to myself today." Probably like 4 or 5 times. At that point I just about noped out of there, but the cashier came over and handled the creeper for me. I ran inside the store and hid until he left. I haven't seen him in the store when I was there since. Another day I was wheeling an empty cart behind the store. This is normal. The greenhouse company will come and pick them up eventually. At our store there also happens to be an alternate way out of the store parking lot and onto the main road. I was bending over to pick up an empty tray that fell over, when all of a sudden I hear a car that was driving by and heard a man say,
"That ass."
I turn around to see an old 50 to 60-year-old black man and his passenger, also an old black dude, drive away. To remind everyone, I am just a white female, lacking your average black woman booty, so why did that just happen? I am sure he has seen more bootylicious butts before. Needless to say, it made me feel incredibly uncomfortable. I dislike this job more and more with each passing day. Last year I encountered this customer whilst working in retail. I work in a department store where there are many departments lumped in together, and on this one day I happened to be working by myself in my own department. There were other colleagues around in the general vicinity, but in my actual department it was just me. I'm an Asian lass in her mid-20s, but very young looking for her age, but that didn't stop this encounter. Anyways, I was just going on about my job, doing my tasking and helping customers, when I noticed this customer, late 30s to early 40s, checking on our cabinet of locked up products which are too expensive for us to leave out on the shop floor. When I approached him, I asked whether he needed my help. He was overly friendly in his response, and he had lots of big hand gestures, and he said, whilst using hand gestures,
"Oh, hello, you. I'm okay for now. Thanks for asking. I'll let you know when I do."
I then said okay, and left it at that. There was nothing creepy looking about that man, average looking, but maybe a bit too much on the friendly side. Anyways, 1 minute later, he then approached me and said,
"Can I have a look at this product, please?"
I then proceeded to open the cabinet and show him the product, and then he told me he's always buying these products and that he's always checking to see if we have more designs in stock. That day, we didn't have any more designs other than the one in the cabinet. He then wanted to see other products in the cabinet. With my job, it's a requirement to try to give outstanding service, so I make small talk with him as I would with any other customer, but in trying to obey retail rules. I then open myself up to be vulnerable for creeper attacks, especially if the customer didn't look to be creepy in the first place, so sometimes it's hard to get out of that situation once you're in it. As I was making small talk, he then started talking a lot. When I say a lot, I mean 3 times more than me. I contributed a fair amount to the conversation, but the guy spoke loads. In fact, so much that he started dragging in personal stuff into the conversation, such as his brother, a family wedding, his sister, his mom, a family funeral, so many random things to talk about, and no shortage of him stopping. I felt that even if I stopped talking, he would do the talking for me. Anyways, it was weird enough for me to hear about stuff that goes on in his family, because I really don't care, to be honest. But what really jarred me was his subtle references to his penis. Once I realized that he was hitting on me, I kept my responses to one-worded sentences and tried to make myself as boring as possible while still serving him, because I'm not going to indulge him by contributing to the conversation and giving him an excuse to continue talking and further prolong the conversation. I wanted it to end as soon as possible and let him know that I'm not interested in this conversation at all. The sad thing about retail is that you're obligated to serve customers, and if you don't, they may complain, sue, or whatever they do nowadays. I have to put myself out there to be potentially targeted. Don't get me wrong, some people in retail are absolutely lovely, but once in a blue moon, you get the oddball out to really set the goosebumps in. When I do encounter weird customers, I do try to get other people to deal with them, but sometimes when you're alone, there's nothing you can do. To be honest, I didn't realize until about the 3rd reference to his penis that he was a perv with a dirty mind, and up until then, I was just laughing politely along with the crap he came up with. How he did it was this: he would make a reference, then laugh it off, and brush it off really quickly with a "just kidding," as if it was just a joke and don't think too much into it. One reference which I remembered was a sharpener which had displayed in the cabinet, and he said this whilst grinning and slightly wagging his eyebrows and doing the, you get it, right? It's big enough to fit my thing in there. I was like, oh Jesus, in my head, but I kept a polite frozen smile on my face whilst thinking, how did he jump from a pencil sharpener to his penis? Only sick people think like that because dirty thoughts dominate their mind, so that's everything they see is sexual. He would be the perfect example for Freud. Another reference was to a small pencil sharpener cufflink, and by that I was already reeling from the fine image he put in my head to immediately understand what he was chatting about. All he did was wag his eyebrows and do the laugh, then point to the small cufflink. I then said, "Oh, stop it," in a slight humorous response. I've never met a customer like that, so I was stuck between being professional and continue serving him as quick as possible, or running off, cringing like crazy. But this is why retail sucks, because you put yourself in harm's way as you deal with customers, and I couldn't just pick up the phone and call security because the guy kept talking so much that it was so difficult to interrupt him and say, hold on, I need to do something. And it would be even harder to wrap up the whole customer transaction and then say, okay, well, I can see you don't need any more help, so I'm gonna go and do my work. The guy reminds me of the type of criminal who talks a lot deliberately in order to distract you from what their accomplice is getting away with. Plus, in retail, you've taught to give 100% attention, and any less is bad, so criminals prey on this type of attentiveness. They take advantage of the very thing we pride ourselves in. Basically, he made about half a dozen references to his ding-dong, and he managed to go under the radar and make it out like it's not a big deal by laughing it off as if he didn't say it. And he also wasted over half an hour of my time in dealing with him, where he managed to prolong time by picking up almost any products inside the cabinet and making a remark about it in order to make me think he was genuinely interested in buying it. As if that wasn't enough, he then went to start picking up products outside of the cabinet, aka the rest of the shop floor, which had tons of products. At one point, he kinda cornered me between the shelving unit and a pillar, and I was showing him more products in a corner. It was kinda hard to move away from the corner if I had to reach out and handle the products there. What really made me feel uncomfortable was that he was standing really close to me. Like how far a normal customer would stand, he would stand only half the amount. This meant it was easy for him to throw himself on me, and I had fears of him trying to kiss me or something. I mean, there literally wasn't enough space for a foot-long subway to go between our faces. I then finally managed to somehow steer him towards the till. Spending half an hour is a long time to be spending with a customer, and my job isn't to serve him only, and I'm not a personal shopper where I can shower customers with my undivided attention. So by the end of it all he came up with was just one item. It wasn't an expensive item either. And this just shows you that he was there wasting my time talking and taking advantage of my availability. He basically got time, and this shows he's probably a loner, desperately in need of a friend or someone to talk to. Throughout the whole encounter, he spoke a lot about his family, but as I served him on the till, he must have thought, okay, this is the moment I get to know her properly, because it's now or never. He asked me about what uni I went to, and at this point I was thinking, huh? At which point did I mention uni? But then I remembered amongst all the rubbish I let slip that I was working part-time, but have finished uni. But that was mentioned at the beginning of the conversation before I knew what a pervy creep he was. And because the question threw me off, I answered it truthfully and told him the uni. He then said, what course? I then answered it truthfully but kept it simple. I would have lied because I was so busy tapping in stuff into the till I couldn't focus on making up a course in uni. After hearing what course I did, he then exclaimed,
"Oh, you're a girl after my own heart."
At that point I got really creeped out and seriously wanted out. I also at that point had enough. What he had said just confirmed he was flirting with me in his creepy, pervy way. After he finished paying attention, he then must have thought, hang on, I haven't had enough of this girl, so he then said,
"Oh, I must show you what I bought last time I came here."
It was as if he ran out of decent things to talk about, so he's resorting to anything, just anything to keep me interested or to keep me occupied. I mean, he's already spoken a lot about his family and stuff, and he's even went on to show me the contents of his 2 wallets and his job, and how he went into immense detail about his travel cards, etc., and the handiness of his wallet, and he did all this without me asking about it. It's almost like he imagined me asking, because at the end of the day, why would I ask someone to show me their wallet? The sad thing is that he is just finding any old excuse to launch into a detailed account of parts of his life. He then went walking ahead towards some products at the front of the store, and I was lingering far back as if in disbelief and wondering when it would all end. Plus, I don't want to talk so far ahead that it seemed like I was just willing and open to listen to him. I wanted to show that 1, I got stuff to do, and I've already served you, so bugger off, and 2, I just am not interested and don't have time for this. I eventually walked up to where he was pointing, and stood well away so that a table full of products stood between us so that my personal space is not once again invaded. He then rambled on a bit about something, and out of nowhere comes another reference to his penis. So I said to him while smirking,
"You come up with a lot of pervy things, don't you?"
And then magically, miraculously, he then quickly said his, "Okay, well I gotta go now," and then walked away really quickly. I was like, wow, if I knew that was the way to do it, I would have said something like ages ago. Half laughing to myself and half shocked by what I had encountered, I then went to my neighboring colleagues who said that they had noticed I spent a long time with this customer and that they could hear his laughter, but not mine. To be honest, I did do some polite laughter, but to them, all they could hear was this guy's laughter. They said I should have just called security, and a guy like that needs to be banned, but I explained to him that the guy just wouldn't let me go. Since then, I have seen him twice come back into the workplace, and always constantly staring in my direction as if waiting for me to approach him for help. One time I did, upon seeing him, ran off to security to report him, but somehow he disappeared from the shop floor once I got security to my department. But because I don't work on the days he visits, I don't see him anymore. Thank Jesus Christ. I'm a female who is in her late 40s, but people often mistake me for early 30s. Thank genetics and sunscreen. I don't think that matters much, but you never know. I have a hobby that I am very involved in. There used to be only 3 stores in town that would cater to what I needed, one of which was very expensive, another which wasn't very high quality. Enter this store, we'll call it Elaine's. So I'm all happy about Elaine's opening. I go there a lot, and the staff get to know me by sight. Nothing wrong there. I'm a generally happy person and will talk to anyone. One day I go to Elaine's and I needed some of their product. This always has to involve an employee measuring it out for me. This day was a guy who I'd made small talk with before. He starts telling me a very long and involved story about breaking up with his girlfriend a month ago. Goes into very minute details. All the while he's staring into my eyes like he's in a trance. I didn't know what to say. I got the worst creep vibe I've ever had in my life. I couldn't get away because he was holding the product I wanted to buy. I just mumbled a sorry, and as soon as he finally gave me my product, I ran to the front. I think this guy is a manager at this store. I try to limit my visits, but every time I walk into the store, within 15 seconds I see him walking up from the back, and with a big smile on his face. I think he monitors the security cameras from the back. He follows me around the store, discreetly. He tries to talk to me, but I give short, one-word replies. The thing is, he doesn't do anything that I could officially complain about. I just dread going there now. On Saturday, I got a call from a few friends about going to the mall. It was a stressful week at work, so I thought some retail therapy would definitely help. We shopped for the typical lady stuff like makeup, lingerie, and shoes before we decided on hitting the food hall for a spot of lunch. I gave the girls my order and told them I would come and find them as I needed to use the restroom. The restrooms are at the end of a large and wide corridor. They were your typical mall type with lots of stalls. So I sat down to, well, you know, and I could see from the gap on the floor between the wall of the stall and the floor, lots of movement from someone's shadow. I wasn't sure if they were getting changed or not, so I didn't pay much attention at first, but it felt like the shadow was coming from above at some points, as if the light above were being obstructed by something. After maybe the 3rd time, I decided to look up, and I could see a phone and parts of a guy's arm leaning over. Someone was taking photos of me. I instantly shouted, "What the fuck, you fucking pervert?" And in a moment of sheer shock and disbelief, this all very quickly turned to fear as I got up and leapt out of the stall and was greeted by an empty bathroom. Not one person was in sight, and from the quick glance of the mirrors opposite, there was only one stall shut that was next to mine. I ran for the restroom exit, but it was locked. Luckily, it had a twist lock that I could turn, and as I did, I heard a stall open from behind me. I got out immediately and turned as I exited and noticed a sign on the floor in the door saying, "Closed for maintenance." This sign was not here when I went in. I screamed some more, shouting to get someone's attention as I ran down the corridor towards the food hall and had obviously caught the attention of a few people. A group of 3 guys stopped me and clearly could see the panic in my eyes. They quizzed me, I explained. 2 ran towards the ladies' room and 1 found security. Security arrived within seconds. After a while, a large crowd had gathered due to the commotion, and although I was in the comfort of my friends, security, and now the police, I'd never felt more alone. Security and the police, nor the 2 guys, found anyone. There was a few staff only and fire exit doors down the corridor, so plenty of escape routes for whoever this guy was to go through. I gave my statement at the station later that day once my parents showed up. The police said they had security tapes from the CCTV cameras that point down the corridor and will keep us updated with any news. Hopefully, they find whoever this guy is. Terrifyingly, I think I'm starting to be stalked. At least I believe so. It's the first time anything like this has ever happened to me. I work in a retail clothing store, one I've been with since July of 2014. During all that time, I've never had someone as creepy as this, except the occasional guy who thought he was handsome enough to get discounts, which of course they never did, or a fair few who have stared a little too long or so. But here recently I came across a guy that actually makes me afraid to even take the garbage out at night. It actually happened around the beginning of this month or so, when my coworker and I were the only cashiers near the end of the day, and we started to get a long line out of the blue. My coworker had a few issues, and of course, being cashier trainer, I went to help. That being said, I had to go from my register and customer to hers. Going back and forth multiple times, I felt very guilty. I finished my transaction and told the guy how very sorry I was, to which he replied, "You're fine," as I handed him his bag and rushed back over to help my coworker. And he then flirtatiously added, "Literally." Of course, he was flirting, but it took me a second to understand it, and being a girl who isn't ever directly flirted with, if I ever am subtly, I apparently am never aware, I got embarrassed and blushed and didn't know how to react. I can't remember if I had a certain reaction, if I smiled out of politeness or what, but he seemed to like my response a bit too much. Unluckily, my coworker's customers were the guy's friends, and they all noticed, so it got weirder, and the guy started wooing and was saying stupidly weird stuff like, "Go over there and kiss her hand," or "touch her hair," and then, "Ah, look, she's blushing," and said some weird stuff I can't remember exactly, but he kept looking at me and smirking, not saying anything while his friends went on. As they were leaving, they told him, "Say goodbye to your girlfriend," to which he waved slowly and said, drawn out and honestly very creepy, "Bye." Odd enough, got kind of weird and creepy, but I decided not to worry about it since he was gone now, though I was embarrassed, this having happened in front of probably 8 or so other people. Even still, I remember noting that I was glad my name tag on my lanyard was accidentally turned around because now he didn't know my name. But I joked it off in the end, talking with my coworkers about how I can't flirt, and we just brushed it off. Then a week or so later, I come into work for closing, and the same coworker is there. She casually says to me, "Hey, remember that guy that flirted with you? He was here again." Of course, I'm creeped out, but I'm thankful I didn't start my shift yet and he was gone. I didn't like that he was back, but I've seen a few customers more than once, so I've shrugged it off again, even though I got a creepy vibe. But then again, a week or so later, while I'm checking a customer out, I hear all the way from the other door. We have 2 sets of doors, one by the register and one closer to the other end of the store, a guy yell, "Hey, Barbie!" And again, it's drawn out and odd, and I look over to see the same guy again, with his group of friends, and he's just smiling like before, and I get a sickening feeling in my stomach. For one, he's back, and 2, how does he know my name? You'll probably say, name tag, duh, but I distinctly noted the first time he didn't know. I start wondering, did he come in here and ask about me? How did he know my name? It doesn't show up on receipts or anything. The only way is to see my name tag, and he wouldn't have seen it from coming in at the door. It was too far away, so how? But then I tried to ignore him, politely talk to a customer, and just watch him from the corner of my eye. He's walking around the store with his pals, not even looking at the clothes, and just looking at me. He disappeared out of my sight. Then he ends up by my register and tries talking to me while I'm checking someone out. He says to me in that same creepy tone, "Hey, how are you doing?" I try to be polite, and the good worker I am, I say, "Good," and nothing more. He just smiles and just looks at me and says in the same creepy tone from before, "You look good too." Feeling nauseous, I say nothing and continue to do my job. I try to show in my body language I'm uncomfortable, but this does not affect him. Me, being right by the door, he starts to walk out and waves to me, very slowly with that same smile, and says very drawn out again, "Whenever you have time, Barbie." I was never so happy to see someone leave, ever. I was so glad I wasn't on the floor at the time, and not too long ago, a day or two, I could have sworn I've seen him again, but I can't be sure. I told my coworker who was with me to begin with about this, and mentioned how he didn't even buy anything, purposely came in to see me and all, and she said he didn't buy anything the second time either when I wasn't there. A few coworkers teased me that he just liked me, but he just gives off this scary vibe I can't shake. Well, I'm not sure if it's really signs of a stalker. I'm just very creeped out and honestly won't take garbage out alone, and definitely won't wait outside alone at night. I'm honestly trying to invest in a taser and pepper spray for safe measure. I really, really hope I don't see him again. So I'm a petite college-age girl working my way through school and retail as a cashier. On Friday night, I was on the front register of our small store. The place was pretty dead since it was foggy, dark, and freezing outside. This guy came in and bought a phone case that came in one of those hard-to-open plastic packages. He didn't talk much during the transaction, just grunted when I said hello and nodded when I asked if he had found everything all right. After he had paid for it, he was fumbling to open the package for a few minutes. He then came over to me and asked if he could borrow our scissors to cut the packages open. I said, sure, no problem. And as I handed him the scissors, he leaned close to me, his hands sliding over mine as he took them. He looked me dead in the eye and said in a quiet, steady voice, "All the better to stab you with," before smoothly walking out and stealing my fucking scissors. I made sure to double check the back seat of my car when I got off work that night. I work in retail and I have a very unique name. This happened a few years ago when I first started. I work at a 24-hour convenience store, and at this point I was working the graveyard shift. I'm used to all types of unsavory folks, but there was this one guy who left me particularly unsettled. It was about 3 a.m., and unfortunately I was working alone because my coworker decided to call out last second. The store was dead, and I was packing out a delivery when he walked in. He was a short, stocky black guy, a little older than me, probably late 20s, early 30s. I looked up from the task at hand and greeted him with a friendly smile and asked him if he needed help with anything. He grinned and looked me up and down, his brown eyes darkening with lust. "Yeah, do you sell condoms?" I nodded and pointed him to the health and beauty section and proceeded to make my way to the register to cash him out. He browses for a little and picks up a box of Magnums and those herbal sexual supplement pills. "So how are you tonight?" he inquired. I told him I was fine, working hard and anxious to go home. His eyes traveled up and down my body. Settling on my name tag, which is pinned just beneath my left breast. I felt a little uncomfortable. I've never been comfortable with people staring at me, and his eyes lingered longer than necessary. He asks how to pronounce my name. I tell him. He says it's nice. Politely, I say thank you and begin to scan and bag his items, trying to avoid eye contact. He asks, do I have a boyfriend? Truthfully, I say yes. He comments that he must be a lucky man, and he wishes he could be in his shoes. Again, I smile uncomfortably, and as we're supposed to do, ask if he needs anything else.
Not unless I can have you,
he drawled lazily. Now I'm getting annoyed. I ignore his comment and proceed to tell him his total. He swipes his card. I complete the transaction and tell him to have a good night. He thanks me and then asks if I'm working by myself.
No, my coworker's downstairs doing some paperwork.
I lied. Now he grins.
No, he isn't. I've been watching you since 12. I haven't seen another person here all this time. Are you afraid?
I frowned. You've been watching me? That's not creepy at all. I tell him he needs to leave if he's done shopping. I have work to complete. Once again, he laughs at me. I thought he was going to argue, but a group of drunken guys walk in, and he leaves. Later that night, I check my Facebook and see I have a friend request. Guess who it's from? Again, I have a unique name. Only 2 people on Facebook have it. I block and delete the friend request. Next morning, as I'm going to the subway station, the wanted poster on the token booth catches my eye. The face is familiar. It was the creep from the store. Wanted for sexual assault and battery on East 96th Street. The incident happened more than a month ago. I quickly told my manager, who called the police and gave him our tip. I don't know if he was ever caught, but I still don't feel comfortable with name tags. I've always loved going to my granny's house, but with her living about 7 hours away, I only got to visit about once or twice a year for only about 2 to 4 days. My granny is mostly Native American and loves nature. She always puts lots of belief into all sorts of haunted stories she heard from family. About 2 or so years ago when I was 13, my parents decided to send me to my granny and papa for a month in the summer because I had told them I liked the rural area she lived in rather than the city we lived in. Can you blame me? Nicer people, cleaner air, beautiful pieces of land. I've always loved and much preferred it. When my parents first left me there, it was the same as always. My older brothers, who were 22 and 27, both also living that area with their wives and kids, asking me about boys at home, and my cousins deciding to roughhouse with the youngest cousin and only girl. When I was little, my granny always wanted me in the house and in bed by the time it was dark. Same for anyone else who was staying in her house that night. She always said it was because of the coyotes, and when I was younger, I never questioned it. But at 13, I definitely questioned why I had to be in bed. I could understand the in-the-house part, but not the in-bed part. The first week, nothing special happened. But by the second week, I noticed some weird stuff. My belongings would go missing, then after intensive searching, I'd find them exactly where I'd left them. And trust me, I've never been a skeptic of the paranormal. My mom and I love watching shows like My Haunted House and such. I also own a Ouija board and tarot cards. So when this started happening, I immediately thought there was a spirit in the house, and I was kind of excited. But then the activity progressed. I would find stuff in my room that wasn't mine or anyone's in the house. They'd be things like old combs, rock necklaces, and once even an old, torn, dirty moccasin. Then, at about my 3rd week there, I'd find myself awake and restless every night at about 3 a.m., which I'm pretty sure is the devil's hour from what I heard, because Jesus died on the cross at 3 p.m., allegedly. Anyhow, I'd always wake up to a whining sound outside my window, like the sound of an injured animal, but something told me it was not an animal. After 4 nights of this, I finally ran to tell my granny. I'm not sure why, but that night I had this terrible, panicked feeling like if I didn't run from that room, I would lose my life that night. My granny sat me down in the kitchen and told me the story about a tribal elder from the Cherokee tribe who could communicate with the tribe's spirit guides. But he soon grew so powerful, he grew bloodthirsty. He used the spirit's powers to turn himself into different kinds of creatures, and in that form he'd attack the people of his own tribe for their flesh. When the chief found him out, he was sentenced to death and was quickly executed. It's said that during the day he's nothing more than a spirit, but at night, He was beast in search of human flesh to feed upon. But not just any humans. Humans with Cherokee blood pumping through their veins, like me and my gran. Nothing much else happened during my stay. However, I did move my dresser in front of the window. But just 2 days before I was supposed to go home, my cousin Christopher Jean, who at the time was 15, stumbled home one night very bloodied and said he'd been attacked. He told my papa it was a coyote, but he told my granny and I he only saw blurs of his attacker as it moved too fast, and he heard nothing but snarls. He yelled the Lord's Prayer, which put off the attack just enough for him to run home. My granny and I believe it was the spirit of the elder.
To begin this story, and to give a little insight about me, I'm 18 years old and I grew up in Michigan. I have lived in the country for as long as I can remember. On one particular hot summer weekend, me and a couple of friends of mine, including my boyfriend, let's call him Tony, and my older brother, let's call him Brad, we decided that we were going to go camping for the weekend. We figured why not, it was such a nice warm week. Tony's parents had owned a cabin way out in Ludington, surrounded by a huge wooded area with the personal lake and no neighbors for at least 4 miles in any direction. But being stupid teenagers, we thought about the isolation as a good thing, more privacy. All we were ready for was to party like any normal teens would be. Well, after we got there and set up for about 2 hours, our fun started. Tony's friends brought tons of alcohol and weed to last us for the whole weekend, so we wouldn't be bored since we had no cellular service and only movies to watch. Before we knew it, it was 12 midnight and it was pitch black out, so we got a big bonfire going. It was a total of 6 people including me and Tony out there. As we talked and laughed about upcoming events in our lives, we were so distracted that we didn't even notice that my brother had literally frozen his eyes onto one section of the woods. Now, keep in mind, at the time we were all intoxicated and high. Eventually, our talking ceased when Tony realized his friend and my brother had an emotionless expression. "Hey, dude, you alright?" he asked Brad. But there was only silence, no reply. Brad didn't even make any movements to indicate that he had heard him. After a few moments of awkward silence from Brad, I began to get a little freaked out. It took a lot to faze my brother, so it was very much unlike him to act like that. Eventually, I was the first to actually question what he was staring at. He wasn't even blinking, staring into one spot in the woods. I turned my head to follow his gaze the best I could, and when I finally saw what he was staring at, my heart sank. There, right freaking there, was what appeared to be a dog at first look. At least that's what I thought. I was assuming that it was some person's dog that wandered off, but then my brain kicked back in, and I remembered that we didn't have neighbors for miles. So how could there be a dog here? My mind was still racing, while Tony tried to get Brad to speak or even move. In one motion, this thing that I thought was a dog, it began to stand, and by God, it was tall. And when I say tall, I mean massive. It must have been at least 6 feet tall. Everyone saw it then. How could you not? I heard a few people behind me gasp in unison as they finally understood the gravity of this situation, of why my brother was as still as a stick. No one moved for what seemed like hours. Eventually, Tony was the first to talk. No tail, he mumbled. No one heard what he said but Brad, and I swear to you I'm not exaggerating when I say his eyes widened as big as pan saucers. Seeing that expression on his face, that look of terror, it scared the hell out of me. "What did you say?" one of the girls asked behind me. "It has no tail," he repeated at her. My heartbeat seemed to stop in that moment, because he was right. Whatever that thing was, there was no tail on it. This was no creature I've seen before. Suddenly, my clouded alcohol mind cleared up in a fraction of a second, because my scared mind made a guess at what this thing was, and I suddenly understood why my brother was basically pissing himself. This thing, it was a skinwalker. My instincts kicked in right then and there, but before I could nope the hell out of there, that thing before us screamed an inhuman scream. That sound was enough to scare the hell out of everyone. My brother was the first to get out of his chair. He began to shout native words to the creature. I turned and solemnly told everyone else that we needed to get the fuck inside. No one questioned me when they saw how serious I was, especially Tony. He's never seen me so scared. I think we all understood that this was a bad situation. We all hightailed it into the cabin, with my brother in tow still shouting native words at the creature, which seemed to keep it at bay, while it gave us enough time to head inside. Once we were all inside, Brad followed, and he slammed and locked the door before turning all the lights off. He ran into the kitchen, opened an old dusty drawer, then pulled out these ceremonial ashes, which he started to sprinkle on the doors and windows while chanting. Of course, the whole situation was so bizarre. We were all petrified, and a few of us were in tears. After he was done, no one said a word, and for the longest time we were silent. We were all just in shock. At one point, he grabbed our dad's pistol, and he had it posted by him for hours. Everyone was entirely too shaken up to even question what just happened. We must have fallen asleep at one point, because when I woke up, my brother was packing all our stuff into the 2 cars. I understood why. We had Navajo heritage. We knew what we were dealing with. We knew it would be back, and it might not be alone. Before we left, I did a blessing on the cabin, speaking a few calming words in my native tongue, and I tried my best to calm the still very freaked out girls as we loaded up into the cars. To this day, we still haven't explained exactly to our friends what happened that night, what we saw. Then again, they never wanted to ask.
I'm half French, half Native American, and I'm in my 2nd year of medical school. I know I'm pretty young, but I look a lot older than I actually am. Most people think I'm 19 or 20. As much as I hate to admit it, I'm from an extremely wealthy family. Both sets of grandparents are old money, and my parents own a highly successful company. My parents are gone on business most of the time, so they insist on me having a bodyguard. I absolutely hate this, but my older brother can give me permission to go places without my bodyguard, so I'm grateful for that. I was meeting up with my best friend and a couple of my other close friends at a local coffee shop to study and talk. I managed to convince my older brother to let me go without a bodyguard. That was a bad decision. I was waiting for my friends at the coffee shop, hanging out at a table in the corner, scrolling through Tumblr and working on calculus problems, when this guy approaches me.
Hey, this seat taken?
I hesitate, as I'm sitting alone at a 5-chair table and the coffee shop is quite busy.
Yes, actually, I'm waiting for my friends. So am I. Do you mind if I wait until my friends show up? He should be here soon.
I motion towards one of the chairs and focus my gaze back on my notebook and calculus problems. I'm a very serious, rather cold person, but I've been raised with manners.
So, are you in college?
Yes. I'm slightly annoyed by this guy talking to me. I'm working at advanced calculus and it takes quite a bit of focus to solve the problems. I take a quick glance at him. He's probably 22 or so, brown hair cut in a popular style. He has blue eyes and light skin. I suppose people would think he's attractive, but I find myself to feel asexual, so I obviously don't care.
Ah, me too. What's your name?
I sigh in a mixture of unamusement and annoyance. I'm a pretty private person, so I just reply with my middle name, Siglinda.
Oh, that's a pretty exotic name. Where are you from?
I have a slight accent, something that my grandmother calls a mix between Navajo and French, but not enough to make a difference.
I'm American.
I suppose the guy takes the hint here and gives up on asking.
I'm Mark. It's nice to meet you, Sieglinde.
I nod and continue my calculus problem. I'm not a very friendly person, plus there's something off about this guy.
So, what stuff are you working on?
Calculus.
Oh, nice. My calculus classes are always so boring. You have really pretty eyes.
I have very unusual chartreuse eyes, considering my background, and I get a lot of compliments on them. I'm used to people hitting on me, so I don't pay much attention to the compliment.
Thank you. So, how long have you lived here?
3 years.
Oh, wow. You're pretty new then.
I suppose.
So where did you live before that?
Seoul. It's true. I was born in and lived in Seoul until I was 12 or so.
Really? That's cool.
My laptop dings as I receive a text from a friend informing me that they'll be a bit late as his younger sister's babysitter hasn't shown up yet. My phone and laptop are connected, and I've left my phone at my family's beach house, and I have to wait until the weekend to head back and get it, so I've been using my iPad or laptop to receive and send texts. I'm looking down at my laptop, and I look up quickly to catch this guy just staring at me. I quickly glance back down at my computer.
It looks like my friend isn't going to be able to make it. I guess I'll have my brother pick me up then. Oh, you don't have a car?
I hear his tone perk up a bit. I'm honestly creeped out by this, and I'm a very logical person.
I do. My brother dropped me off here, so I have to study. I can drive you.
What about your friend? Warning bells are going off in my head by now.
Oh, he wouldn't mind.
No, it's fine. I quickly type in a text to the guy who drives me places to pick me up immediately and hit enter.
No. Save him some trouble. He's just getting out of karate right now. It's fine.
He's actually a black belt, but he's not in karate. He's at home with his best friend working on school. He's in his 4th year of medical school as well.
Oh? How many siblings do you have?
I have 2 older brothers. I'm lying through my teeth. I have 2 younger twin sisters and an older brother. My oldest brother died 3 years ago in an accident where a drunk driver hit him.
Are they big and scary?
He asks in a teasing tone, but I don't think he's teasing.
Karate is quite impressive,
I reply coldly.
Geez, there's no need to get so offended.
What makes you think I'm offended?
You're so cold. Just smile more a little bit.
I absolutely hate it when people tell me to smile. I shut my laptop and slide it into my book bag.
My ride's here. It was nice meeting you.
My parents are classy. Creepy or not, I'll be polite to him. I slide my notes into my notebook and put it into my book bag. I also sketch, and I'm pretty decent at it. I've been watching this show. You may have heard about it before since it started airing. It's called Kuro Shitsuji. My best friend is half Japanese, half Korean, and he's the one who got me into it, as well as one of the characters having the same name as me. I watched it a lot when my brother died, and as cheesy as it sounds, it helped me through a lot. In fact, that's why I mostly draw. It shocks me when the guy holds up my notebook filled with random sketches.
Where the hell did you get that?
I snap, reaching for it.
You dropped it on the floor.
He hands it back to me.
You're great at art. What else do you draw?
I stuff the notebook in my bag while glaring at him.
Hey, no need to get offended. You're a great artist. What exactly are you drawing?
I suppose he could have snatched the sketchbook while I was working on calculus and flipped through it while I wasn't looking, but it's still strange. By this time my driver has arrived and I spot the familiar black Rolls-Royce with tinted windows and breathe a sigh of relief.
My ride's here. Goodbye.
I walk towards the door, and unsurprisingly, he follows me. I grab the door and pull it open.
Is that your ride?
He asks in a slight tone of shock, looking at the black vehicle I'm heading towards. If I'm not wrong, I see a quick smile spread across his face for a moment. I don't really care if he sees the car. We have a lot of different cars, and if I wanted to, he'd never see that car in town again. I walk over, and before my driver can open my door, I pull the car door open and quickly direct him not to drive home yet and make sure the guy doesn't follow me in French before sliding into the seat and slamming the door shut. This guy proceeds to rip my door open and exclaim,
So what? You think you're just gonna ignore me like that?
I was briefly in shock, but before he had a chance to escalate things any further, my driver had him subdued in a standing Kimura. She'll be leaving now, my driver says as he releases his grip, closing my door and returning to the driver's seat. I could see the boy grabbing his shoulder in pain, flipping us off as we drove in the distance.
You really know how to pick them, ma'am,
my driver says with a smirk.
It seems like they always pick me,
I respond, smiling and returning to my notes.
If you don't know what a rougarou is, it's a Native American demon who, according to myth, has to give blood to the devil, because if it doesn't, the devil will take its blood instead. This story took place in 2003. My girlfriend and I, let's call her Yvonne, along with several of our friends and their wives, went out camping in the woods. We were out there for about 5 days. The first day was fine and everything was pretty normal, as was the second day. We were just having a good time. But by the third day is when everything went downhill. We were all sleeping in our tents that night until I heard rustling outside. Now, we all slept in different tents with our significant others. As such, I thought it'd be fun to give each tent a walkie-talkie. That way, we wouldn't have to call out to each other to talk or exit the tents in case of emergency. So immediately, when I heard this strange rustling sound, I got on the walkie and I asked Doug and Chad if, from their separate tents, if they could hear the noise in the woods. They said yes, almost cutting me off, because apparently they were about to ask me the same thing. So we guys decided to meet outside the tents to see what was going on. Before I exited mine, I made sure to grab my rifle. Outside, we met up toward the center of the campsite. By then, the noise seemed to be getting closer. It seemed like the sound was heavy. It sounded more like another person in the woods, rather than some animal of the night. This worried me more than anything. We walked over, quietly, trying not to make a noise, when right out of the blue, we heard this nightmarish screaming. But this sound was coming from behind us. We immediately turned around by instinct to see what that noise was. I felt goosebumps all over my body, even before I saw what it was. At first, I honestly thought it was another person, because it looked like an older woman, someone who definitely shouldn't have been in the forest this time of night. But it only took a few moments for me to realize that this was no person. Her skin was far too pale, and it looked like it was rotting right off of her body. And then I saw her legs, which were veiny and bent backwards, and they seemed to end in claws rather than feet. My mind and body seemed to give out. I almost dropped my gun before I remembered that I had it. This thing, whatever it was almost to my tent where Yvonne was sleeping, and God knows what this thing wanted. So I took aim and I shot at the thing. I must have hit it because it screamed again. This time it was louder and sounded like it was in pain. It then turned and dashed off into the woods. Doug and Chad went after it, while I tended to Yvonne to make sure she was okay. Thankfully, everyone was fine, so when Doug came back from chasing that creature away, we all loaded up into the sedan. We didn't even bother packing up our gear or tents. We just got the hell out of there. Needless to say, it took a while for me and my friends to want to go camping again, and to this day, we will not return to that area of the woods.
I live on the Menominee Reservation in Wisconsin. Growing up around here, paranormal and mysterious activity is something that most of us, and honestly probably Native Americans in general, have grown accustomed to. We all have our own local police force, and I was told this story through one of the police officers who had been employed there for quite some time. He will stay anonymous for privacy reasons. So how our reservation is laid out is there are a lot of tribal housing areas and a ton of woods and trees, basically what the tribe is known for. There was a night where this officer and his partner were called to an initially thought domestic violence call. It is a pretty normal thing around here, unfortunately. So the individual who made the call explained that they could hear people screaming, fighting, breaking and shattering glass within this residence, so the two officers rushed over to the alleged residence, and as they approached the house, they too could hear the screaming, kids crying, and the place basically being destroyed from inside. The officers had to engage and try to stop the violence. As they knocked on the door, they could still hear the ruckus, so they had to bust the door down for safety reasons, and when they entered the residence, it was completely dark, and the officers had flashed their lights everywhere and couldn't find a single piece of evidence that anything violent had taken place, and the entire residence was empty. Both of the officers had left and were extremely creeped out from this experience, and don't really talk about it from the best of my knowledge. And to be completely honest, it really surprised no one around the town, considering creepy experiences are a normal thing around here. I hope I have more opportunities to share creepy stories from around this dark heritage.
There was a story told to me as a young child. A story my grandmother used to tell me. My grandma is Cherokee. Way back when, the Cherokee Indians covered most of the southeast United States. The Nu-Nu-Nu-Wee is a monster of the Cherokee beliefs. It is described as a human-like being with a skin as hard as stone, of which no weapon can pierce. It's also known as the Stone Man. When my grandma was a small girl, my great-grandfather took her hunting in the woods of Kentucky to get food for their supper. They got down to a river bottom and they saw an elderly man with a cane. He appeared to be very dirty, with rags for clothes that were covered in holes. My great-grandfather saw the man's face, so he yelled out to ask the man if he needed some help. Oddly though, the man did not respond, so he yelled out to him again, "Sir, do you need any help?" The man still did not say a word. Then, out of nowhere, a large deer came running towards my grandma and my great-grandpa. My great-grandfather grabbed my grandma, and the deer ran past like he didn't see a thing. And to make matters weirder, the elderly man finally turned around and spoke, but this is what he said. "I like that little girl." That's when my grandma began to cry, praying to God that everything would be okay. The next thing she knew, the man had pulled out a gun, and he began to shoot towards my grandma and great-grandfather. His skin began to turn a gray color, like the rocks on a stone path. The elderly man yelled again, "When I catch you, I'll eat you, then lay you down to die." My grandma was bawling her eyes out, when suddenly my great-grandfather's dog, Tuiki Leo, came running down at full speed and began to bite the man. From there, my grandma could hear the gnashing of the dog's teeth. The dog didn't even leave a mark, and it sounded like the dog was chewing on a rock. The elderly man smiled with this dog attacking his arm, and that's when whatever this man was picked up the dog that was biting him, and he began to chew on him. My great-grandfather, a big and powerful man in his day, who was known to never be scared of anything, had a look of dread and terror in his eyes. He picked up my grandma right away and ran back through the forest, taking her away from that man, from that disturbing scene. But only a few minutes later, they heard very loud, very heavy footsteps behind them. When they reached the edge of the forest, they took one look back behind them, and there was the man, the same distance he was before. He had a bloody smile on his face, and he was laughing. He was still holding the dog. Tuiki was now lifeless. My great-grandfather turned and ran out of the forest completely, and when they looked back again, The man was gone. Finally out of that forest, my great-grandfather and grandmother felt a sense of peace and safety. My grandma has since passed on, but during her time on Earth, she told me this story many times, and she actually had a journal entry on it from when she was a child. I'm 3/4 Cherokee myself, and to this day, I won't go into those woods because I fear the man may show up again. I fear the Nununu-wee.
Back in 2010, when I was 8 years old, my sister got her first own laptop for her 13th birthday, a Sony Vaio. Back on the family computer, when she had the chance to, she would always be on it, talking to her friends on Chat Avenue. She was on it so much she was made a moderator. So, of course, driven by pride and popularity, she was straight back on it the day she got her laptop set up. Now, she had a lot of friends on there that she chatted with, but there was one person in particular that she was constantly, and I mean constantly, talking to. Cody 240. Cody introduced himself as a 15-year-old boy from Manchester, New Hampshire, but as we are from Kent and he did not specify, we thought the English Manchester. We later find out he traveled from America. I could only describe it as he was almost head over heels in love with my sister, to a point it was almost disturbing. When she got home from school, he would already be there, waiting for her. They would talk far into the night. I would be on the top bunk of our bed, drifting off to sleep, and she would still be talking to him. They would camp sometimes as well, and he would say hello to me if I was there. But he never showed his face on cam, something I should have saw as a red flag for my sister. He just wore long hoodies with his head down and said it would ruin his confidence because he always felt ugly. Most of the time, Cody was really nice and kind to my sister, but sometimes he wasn't. If she wasn't on immediately when she got home, or if we went on holiday or were away, he would become really emotionally abusive. He would spread rumors about my sister, telling everyone in the chat that Gracie, my sister, is a whore. Gracie sends naked pictures and talks badly about all of you, all of which none is true. They would ban him, but he would come back with different names and sob stories until people pitied him enough to let him back in on his other username. My sister would cry her eyes out when the other mods told her of his doings, but as the kind person she is, she would always give him another chance, until enough was enough, and in March of 2011, after almost a year of talking to him, she gave in and told all the other mods to ban him on the site if he ever tries to resurface. It was the summer of 2011, and we have heard nothing from Cody. I'm playing with my friends at lunch one day in my primary school when the lunch monitor comes and tells me my dad is in the waiting room, waiting for me. I find this odd as I walk, as my dad would surely be fast asleep right now, as it is 12 and he works a graveyard shift of 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. 5 days a week. Nevertheless, I go to the office and the receptionist directs me down to the waiting room. I enter and nobody is there, so I sit down for a while, and then I see the silhouette from outside the opaque glass windows. For what was probably around 2 minutes, someone just stood there, loitering, until I asked, "Dad?" A man opened the door and just stared at me, smiling. Alas, it was not my father. If this man was Cody, he was definitely not a 15-year-old boy, more like a late 40s man with poor grooming skills. He was grinning in such a way that one would grin in those dental adverts, and then just like that, he placed a note on the chair next to me and ran out, vaulting over the outside hedge and running down the road in the direction of my sister's secondary school. I picked up the note. It was from my sister's school planner, which I later found out that she had left on the corridor shelf, and which is how I later found out the man had broken into our house. I read the note as best I could with his scribbly writing, and then crumpled it up and shoved it into my jumper sleeve. I started to cry as I walked out. I was scared for my sister and thought he was going to hurt me. The note read, "If I don't find you, at least you will know how much I care from this letter. Baby, we are meant for each other. I came all this way for you. You know I'd do anything. We belong together. You belong with me. I have no reason to live without you. So save me, baby. It will be hard, but save me. Your one and only, X. I felt sick. The receptionist asked me if I was all right, and I told her yes, but I went and cried for the rest of lunch that day. When school finished, I went and got on my bike and rode fast despite the road being bumpy, typical countryside obstacle course. In the end, I fell off my bike trying to let a car pass, but the adrenaline running through me was so thick, I just placed my bike aside and ran the last sprint to my sister's school. I stopped short outside the gate as I saw the same man waiting outside, arms crossed, something metallic glistening in the side of his pocket. It didn't look like a meat cleaver or something brutal, but it was like a butter knife with more jagged edges. I didn't want to run into him again, so I just put my coat hood up and calmly crossed the road. He was on his phone texting and kind of bobbing his legs like you do when waiting impatiently for something. I got the note out as I fast walked and read it again. My sister had confided a lot to him, but if this was Cody, how could he have found us? And where was my sister now? And then I remembered it was Tuesday, and it was her year's day to have their last 2 periods in the local church. I was guessing I had about 5 minutes before 3:30, and I was out of view of the school, so I had some time to run. I made it to the church as she was leaving with a couple of friends and told her a man was here for her. I gave her the note, and her friends started reading it. She then emerged again, grabbed me, and ran. I asked her why we were running, but she kept pulling my arm to run faster, and we made it to the back of the house until she told me that if that note is from her planner, he already probably knew where she was. We woke up our dad inside and told him what had happened. He read the note, and we all called the police. We came down to the station, and I gave a description. 2 weeks pass. Nothing. Another 2 weeks pass, and we end up going back to the police, but to no avail. No man or Cody was ever found. It was like he never existed. My sister discontinued her use of Chat Avenue after that, but that was only because people kept saying that Cody had come on and told them he's coming back for her, and she will regret leaving the love of her life. Came off Star is typing.
Is anyone else bored? I don't want to play Gmod anymore, and I don't want to play 4 more hours of Battlefield 1.
JRed13 is typing.
Nah, man. I'm having fun. It's just you.
LMI Legend is typing.
Yeah, I'm bored too. Let's go do some other shit. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. It was 4 a.m. and I had school tomorrow. My friends finally convinced me to pull an all-night gaming marathon. I sighed, knowing that I would regret this in the morning, and finally forced myself to open my eyes. You guys are fucking weird then. We gotta pass the time somehow. We got like 2.5 hours left until school. What do you guys suggest? Hey, how about World of Tanks? I thought about it for a second, but World of Tanks was really not my type of game. If anything, I wanted to play some Rainbow Six Siege, but nobody else in my group liked it. They thought it was really slow-paced and wasn't a lot of fun. Yeah, no, fuck World of Tanks. Too gritty anyways, and not fun enough to grind for good tanks. Yeah, man, I guess I can agree with that. Hey, can we start a group call or something? I'm sick of typing. Hell no. My ears hurt from wearing this headset for 8 hours, and I don't want to hear you guys talking into it. I just want to play. Sound off, KK?
Martin has joined this room.
Who the fuck is Martin? I got no clue. Who invited him? Yeah, not me. Hey Martin, who the fuck are you?
Martin is typing.
Hello, friend.
Alright, which one of you guys is using an alternate account? I'm not prone to spooks. Good effort though. Hey man, I'm not doing it. Yeah, same here. Kick him maybe? Yeah, I got it. I place my hand on the mouse and click on Martin's name. What came up was a profile with no name, bio, and a solid black profile picture. Scrolling down, I discovered that the account had only been made a few days before. Okay, seriously, who the fuck is doing it? The account was made like a few days ago. Don't try and fuck with me. It's not me, man. Hey, just kick him already, and let's go play something. Alright, but if you're fucking with me, tell me tomorrow. I'm really curious to see which one of you guys did it. I right-clicked on Martin and multiple options came up. I clicked on kick, and clicked out of the menu. Okay, he should be gone now. That was fucking strange. It was probably Legend though, man. He's a dick like that.
Martin is typing.
What the fuck is going on? Seriously, it's one of you. And if you don't tell me, I'll kick you. I promise.
Group call started.
I nearly fell out of my chair, not realizing that my speakers were actually not muted. The sudden ring caught me off guard. I quickly hit mute on the speakers and turned back to the screen.
Martin, LMI Legend, plus one other person are calling.
I was starting to worry. This was just too bizarre to ignore. I tried kicking Martin again, but it didn't work. Confused, I looked at the call pop-up. Whoever this was, I decided that I should at least play along for now. I moved the mouse over to the green pickup call button and clicked. The text to the chat room was replaced by the call screen, showing the profile picture of my two friends, along with the solid black profile picture that this Martin guy had. I quickly plugged in my headphones and put them on. Breathing. The sound of someone breathing into their microphone was what I was greeted with. When I put on my headphones, it was extremely loud, like the person had the microphone right up to their mouth. The microphone clearly did not have a pop filter, as the breathing came out loud and distorted. I quickly turned down my volume, as the breathing was beginning to hurt my head. In the background, I heard both of my friends talking, but I simply could not make out what they were saying. After a little while, both of my friends hung up. Putting my hand on the mouse, I began moving it towards the red hang up button, but I was interrupted by a sudden change on my screen. The solid black square of a profile picture was replaced with a loading icon. This Martin person was turning on their camera. Now here's something that you need to know about me. I'm the type of asshole who has to be skeptical about everything. Whenever I see something on the internet that I simply doubt, I will ask questions. If somebody shows me a supposedly haunted video, I usually just end up laughing and counter it with simple logic. However, what I saw was something completely different. It was not a hoax or some asshole trying to joke around. What I saw was real. The loading icon disappeared and was replaced with an image. Black. That was the first thing I saw. Then, I saw a slight movement. As I examined the darkness more and more, I realized that I was seeing somebody walking. At first, I wasn't sure where, but then I saw grass. It wasn't very visible, but I saw it. Suddenly, the darkness was replaced by a bright light. The person walking had just turned on a flashlight. I looked closely and saw grass, as well as a tree in the distance. The person then turned around, and my blood ran cold with terror. I realized exactly where the man was. When he turned around, he pointed the camera at a house. It was pitch black, except for a single bright and slightly yellow glow coming from the second floor window. Right next to the man was my father's grill, with folding chairs placed around it. To the far right of the house, I saw the small garden shed that we had, specifically used for storing tools. The man was standing in my backyard. I leapt out of my chair and ran downstairs to make sure both the front and back doors were locked. Realizing that they were, I ran back upstairs and looked at my screen. Scrolled down past the countless messages of my friends, asking me if I was okay or if I was asleep, to see a single message from Martin.
I go in now.
Jerking away from the computer screen, I looked to the single window in my room, overlooking the backyard. My backyard was mostly empty, with almost nothing but a tree in the middle. On the tree stood a man, a very tall yet thin man. This man was wearing almost nothing other than some tore-up jeans and a shirt. He must have triggered the motion sensor garden lights, as the whole garden was now lit up. I could see almost every detail, and what I saw terrified me. The man was crouching on a branch, with a crazed spark in his eyes. His mouth was now stretched into a wide, insane grin, and I could see his horrible rotten yellow teeth. In his hand, he held a mobile phone and a flashlight. Suddenly, he tossed the flashlight and his phone to the side. He leapt down off the tree and towards the back door of the house. I heard loud banging noises and what sounded like wailing coming from downstairs. My parents burst through my door, asking me what the hell was going on. My younger brother stood by their side, grasping at my father's leg. I didn't know what to say, so I just told them that there was a man downstairs trying to get in. They rushed downstairs and told me to lock my brother in the upstairs bathroom. Holding my brother's hand, we walked